вистраждав на все. Я знаю, інші гордовито прапороносець понесе. Дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у незв'язованій журбі. Всю кров мою зі скитання воно зібрало у собі. Всю кров мою зі скитання воно зібрало у собі.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар.
Let's go!
Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод. Слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Yes.
The Leaf Street Army sends its regards.
О, бля! Игорь! Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 389 of the news. And of course, it is Fundraiser night.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. Bad voice crack there, by the way.
Yeah.
And also, it is the Sunday fundraiser night. An incredible night. Every single week we run a fundraiser, and before this fundraiser even began tonight, we were sitting at literally $870,000 total raised over the history of this channel. $870,000. And so we're getting really close to the $1 million mark. We're not going to reach it tonight, I know that, but we'll get way on up there. And of course, tonight's fundraiser is for Save the Children. Save the Children is one of those nonprofits that we picked up on and haven't really put down, almost like Doctors Without Borders. It's an incredible nonprofit organization that's been saving the lives of children the world over, and especially in Ukraine over this past year and about a month, to a massive degree. They are the go-to organization that saves the lives of the children inside of Ukraine and gets them out of the dangerous war zones and other dangerous areas of Ukraine and brings them to safety, either in the rest of Ukraine, moving them further west, or even into other countries like Poland, Germany, or elsewhere. They are incredible. And I've already thrown in my $100 tonight to the fundraiser. That'll also be mentioned later, because I always back up the fundraisers we run by putting $100 into them myself, because one, I believe in the fundraisers we do and the help that the Lee Spring Army is able to provide to these nonprofits in doing their job. And not only that, that's my assurance to y'all that I actually do believe in the fundraisers, that I'd put $100 of my own money into it. And so with that, it's now time for us to get into today's news. And the title is exquisite, to say the least. It is a very interesting title. Ukraine wins in Bakhmut. It's a very simple title, 4 words long, and it pretty much gets the point across as to what we'll be covering in the news a little bit later on tonight. But according to some Ukrainian commanders, they're saying that the Battle of Bakhmut has just ended and the Ukrainians won it. We'll be going over that statement here later on in the stream, and we'll be seeing whether there is anything to corroborate that statement or if it's being made in the moment. But before we get to all of that, because that's going to be a little bit later on in the night, we're going to be moving down into the Black Sea. What's interesting is that, of course, Matthew, there's a song that we play at the very beginning of the stream called Bayraktar. And so we were way off sync, like on my end, you're like 5 seconds off. But anyways, there is a Bayraktar, and the Bayraktar is a Turkish drone made by the Baykar company in Turkey. A decent amount of them have been provided to the Ukrainians over the course of this war, and a lot of people have been asking questions about them over these previous few months, because there's not really a lot of footage or evidence of them even existing anymore. A lot of people have been asking, are they not using them anymore? Have they been shot down? What's going on with these Bayraktars? We never see or hear of them anymore. And today, for one of the first times ever, we got footage of a Bayraktar in flight. And oddly enough, it was getting the same treatment that the MQ-9 Predator got over the Black Sea. And what's even weirder is that I was getting this treatment by the Russian Air Force, which apparently mistook the Ukrainian Bayraktar for a Turkish Bayraktar, and so instead of shooting it down when they found it, they started to try and put it out of the sky by flying close in front of it. So here's the video footage of a Ukrainian Bayraktar just yesterday being intercepted by Russian Su-27s. We can see that this Bayraktar is flying at 20,000 feet, which lets us know that it can look out into the horizon at least 140 miles in every direction. So what you're seeing out there, once again to recap this much like we did with the MQ-9 Predator, what you're seeing out on the horizon is 134 miles away from this drone. So keep that in mind, because it looks like over here there may be something, I can't really tell if it's land or not, but here's the clip. Also, we're going to have to mute the music because I don't know if that track is copyrighted. But you can see the Su-27 fly in front of the Bayraktar. The Bayraktar is about to get hit by the jet's, I guess you could say, turbulence. It starts spiraling out of control, as we can see right there. It's now nosediving. It dived about 2,000 feet in a very small amount of time. It appears that the camera is still catching up. And we can see that it went from 74 knots to top speed of about 110 knots. It's now trying to climb again, it appears. And it's now trying to stabilize itself, it seems. And now it appears that it's stabilized its flight again. Also, thank you, Braun 10.
I'm surprised it recovered.
Yes, it's pretty interesting. It's not that crazy that it recovered, but still, it's crazy to see how much it got knocked around by the jet's. I guess you could say exhaust, or as
Like wake.
Bronton said, jet wash, which is the correct term. The wake. Aye, Captain, the wake be strong on this one. But we're in the middle of the air. Shut your mouth, boy. It's wake. But anyways, really interesting to see, and also really funny to think that the Russians could have shot this thing down, but because it was a Bayraktar, they couldn't tell whether it was a Turkish Bayraktar or a Ukrainian Bayraktar. Because one thing that we do know, and has not been mentioned much over the course of this war, is that the Turkish also do the Turks do the same thing that the United States does, which is take off drones from their territory or NATO territory and then fly them into the Black Sea to conduct surveillance. It's something that isn't really talked about much, but the Turks do conduct that on a regular basis, and that's what saved this Ukrainian Bayraktar from being shot down, because there's so many Turkish Bayraktars in flight in the Black Sea on a daily basis, it's hard to distinguish a Ukrainian Bayraktar from a Turkish Bayraktar. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that wild video right there, and on into the next one, nice and inside of Ukraine. But before we do, let me make sure that I'm not forgetting any international news, and I'm not. We just have that much news, and it's all in Ukraine today. We're now going to be moving into the location unknowns, and I know that many of y'all come here for wild videos. Well, not really wild videos, but interesting videos nonetheless. And today we have probably the wildest and weirdest video I've ever seen of a Russian helicopter being shot down. We're about to watch a Ka-52 get shot down, and the cameraman is standing practically right under the helicopter. So with that, here's the clip. And from what we understand, this happened just today. So here it is.
Disaster.
Oh, we gotta mute that.
Oh.
Disaster. Anyways, we can see the
He was
Ka-52
right.
flying up. We can see the Manpad missile flying right into the side of the Ka-52, hitting it. And what we can see right here is the helicopter rotor blades exploding. And this is a very special feature of the Ka-52. It's the only helicopter in the world where the pilots can actually eject right out of the cockpit. And the way they do this is that the helicopter blades blow off of the helicopter's main rotor, so they just explode straight out to the sides of the helicopter, and then the ejection seats fire directly upwards with nothing slicing up the pilots anymore. So you see it happening right there. And that's the end of the clip. Now, I don't know what happened to the cameraman, considering that it looks like right here, the helicopter is kind of going to come down on him, but apparently he was able to get out of there just fine and upload this video online. But this is the craziest video I've ever seen of a helicopter getting shot down, considering he was right under it when it happened.
Those missiles haul butt, too. Those are fast.
Yeah, I mean, like, those things are fast. Let's watch it again. Got him. Man, I mean, like, that's wild. And that's another, somewhat rare at this point, Ka-52 that's been shot down. We can't even calculate the losses that the Ka-52 forces and the Russian helicopter forces have taken over the course of this war. We're assuming that it's at least over 50, and there's only 106 Ka-52s in the Russian army. And so we may have just seen that another one of these, the remaining 40-ish% of Russia's Ka-52s, was just shot down right here on this clip, literally right from under it. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from that wild video, probably one of the wildest ones we've seen in a while, and on into the next clip, where we saw the Ukrainian soldiers training on a new British anti-tank weapon, which many of y'all may know, the in-law, otherwise known as I guess you could say your mother-in-law. We can see them trying to fire off. Dang, what a roast! But we can see him.
Damn,
firing,
son.
We can see him firing off the in-law here, and it's about to be a dud. It's actually about the missile. The best way to describe it. It's about to slam right into the ground about 30 yards from him. So here's the clip.
Man, those in-laws are explosive.
Yeah, I mean, those in-laws are explosive, man. You always try and get them as far away from you as you can, but despite your best efforts, they always end up just in earshot of you. And when you see him fire it, the missile lands about right there. And the soldier up here, he's like, oh crap, and he's getting down. Luckily, it's a training round, so it doesn't have a massive explosive in it. It appears that it didn't explode either, which is very lucky for these Ukrainian soldiers. No one was wounded or killed in this incident, but it's kind of a funny one to see, considering it always looks so funny, because you can tell that no one really expects the weapons to fail. You know, like this one right here. Like, watch this guy, he launches it. You see the missile go flying right there. It landed its grass, and Aaron's just like, oh, that's not good. And so then he starts getting down. So that's the end of that clip. But once again, a little training incident. Nothing more, nothing less. Luckily, it isn't a rushing training incident where they're firing an AK at their trainees and end up blowing one's head off. It's just that a training missile, ended up falling incredibly short. We're now going to be moving on into our next bit of Location Unknown news, which is also fairly interesting. Many of y'all may know of the Flak 88. This is a gun that was used in the Second World War by the German Army, also known as the Heer. Not the Wehrmacht. The Wehrmacht actually refers to the entirety of the German Armed Forces. The Heer is the German Army. And we can see one of these right here. We can actually see a lot of them right here. And this was probably... Oh, dang it, it won't show it too well. That disappoints me. So we'll show this one. This one's on a railroad car, but generally the same principle. Also, did you notice, Matthew, that these German soldiers are wearing nothing but a helmet and boxers?
Is it because it's hot outside?
Maybe? I don't know. I mean, like, that's kind of weird. And what's the point of wearing a helmet if the shrapnel is going to be able to go into every other part of your body but your brain? I mean, like, you're pretty much dead anyways. But anyways...
Need to feel a little protected, at least.
Man, this guy said that it's so hot in the weather, so I'm going to have to wear some boxes, yeah? But anyways, these guns are ancient. As many of y'all may know, they are over 80 years old, and you don't really see them getting used anymore. However, in the 50s, there were a lot of guns that looked incredibly similar to these and were used in almost a similar fashion as the Flak 88, which became incredibly famous in the Second World War, especially in North Africa. But what's interesting is the Ukrainians were able to capture a massive amount of Russian guns, and they are KS-19s. And I'll pull those up for y'all real quick. Cannon. And so, let me go to the images. And as you can see right here, a striking similarity. The barrel's a little bit longer, but a very striking similarity to a Flak 88. It's very similar looking, I would say. And what's interesting about the KS-19 is if we go to the year it was put into service, it was put into service only 5 years after the Second World War. So you can tell that it's actually from the same age as the Flak 88 gun, just a couple of years younger. And we saw that the Ukrainians captured a mass of these, 11 of them, that were in a storage facility near the front lines. And there they all are. See him looking at all of them. And it looks like the tires have also dry rotted on some of these things as well. And there's some more of them over there. And then there's just a car on cinder blocks. Oh my god, it's Detroit.
Jeez.
What the hell
What kind of car even is that?
I don't even know. I have no idea, but it's on cinder blocks and the wheels are gone. Someone stripped it for the copper. But anyways, moving on from that, which is hilarious. It looks like the Russians would be able to stomp the Ukrainians, Matthew, with these guns if it was 1945. Unfortunately, it's not 1945, it's now 2023, and all 11 of these not only look like they're garbage, like they were poorly maintained, but they're so obsolete they may as well not be usable. I don't even know what was the point of bringing these things to Ukraine, especially in this condition. You can see that a lot of the tires don't have any air in them, most of them have deflated and rotted. Most of these guns have visible rust all over them.
I guess it's just for looks at this point.
I guess. I mean, like, there's really not much you can get out of these things rather than just straight up garbage. I mean, scrap metal, maybe? Dang. Well, it's good to know that the museums here in the United States will be getting some brand new museum pieces. We're always happy to get more museum pieces here in the United States to teach folks about the history and failures of, one, communism, and two, the Russian armed forces in Ukraine. And also the overall lack of equipment that they have, which has shocked many people around the world. But at this point, that's not really shocking to Matthew and me anymore because we've seen it about 1,000,000 times. We're now moving on to the next clip of Location Unknown News, where we saw a little baby dog begging to a Russian soldier. It was a very sweet little dog. So with that, here's the clip. You see that it's on its hind legs, waving to the soldier. Very cute dog. Oh, man, he's doing the Mr. Corgi thing!
Hey!
Look! He's like, pet me, man.
Dog said, hands up, please don't shoot.
Oh, that's a cute dog.
Oh, man, that's a sweet dog. Save that one. Look at him.
Oh,
Poor thing's scared somewhat.
I like that dog. That's a cute dog. And that's the end of that
I wonder what
clip.
kind of dog that is.
I don't know. It's if anyone knows what kind of dog it is, we're about to get 1,000,000 answers for it. But if anyone knows what kind of dog it is, share it in the live chat because I would love to know what kind of precious little dog this thing is. I like how it sits. Like it sits like a little person. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that bit of Location Unknown News and on into our next one, where we saw some brand new equipment on the Ukrainian side on the move. And I just saw Vanika say corruption. I don't think the dog's corrupt. we're looking at Vladimir Putin's side man right here. He was funneling hundreds of millions of US dollars through laundering programs and stuff like that. He's a mutt. He's a mutt.
The dog's saying, please, don't go any further. You'll find my wads of cash.
He's trying to stop them because the trap house is right behind him. He's like, stop, don't go any further. He's like, don't go any further, man. Oh man, but anyway,
This dog's really a gangster. Like, don't be fooled.
Man, it feels good to be a gangsta. But anyways, we're moving on from that clip and on into the next one, where we saw a whole bunch of brand new equipment on the move in a rear line area in Ukraine. We don't really know where this is, but we saw quite a sizable recovery vehicle. We've never seen these recovery vehicles in Ukraine before. Carrying behind it a M113. We saw a Humvee passing by. We saw another M113. In fact, we see multiple M113s passing by in a convoy, and even more Humvees. If you looked at this and didn't know this was in Ukraine, you would almost think that this is the Gulf War in the early 90s, with so much American equipment around. And you see some MRAPs back here and more Humvees. And we can see what may even be some American supply trucks up there. I can't really see the front of them to tell. But man, I mean, like, good lord. Man, call this the gravy train because they got about every single thing you could ever want from America right here, except for Bradleys and Abrams, and those are on the way here soon.
Well, where's the gravy, though?
Well, you have to go out in the field and make it, Matthew. Russians being hit by 50 cal turn into gravy really quickly, if you know what I mean. It's a red kind of gravy.
Thick.
We see them now moving on inside of a Humvee. And so with that,
Nothing like a Humvee. Plenty of space. Real American looking on the inside of it.
oh yeah, it was so American. I wonder how much a Humvee costs these days. Humvee auction. So let's see, Humvees for sale on GovPlanet. Hopefully they're not like the ones that have been shredded up, you know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Let's see here. 3,500. I have bad Oh wow, only $3,500 for that. There's got to be a
Well, it's
million.
an auction.
Say what?
It's an auction, so it starts at 3,500.
True, but I mean, like, still, even for the start at 3,500, you know, wow. Oh, okay. Well, apparently we can't see the rest of them, but that is a pretty nice looking Humvee, at least on the exterior. Who knows what under the hood looks like, but that's still a nice one. You know, just to start at 3,500 at an auction. I mean, like, none of these really look bad. I wonder if you could get one with, like, the armored side doors. Look, you could even get this, this ambulance version of the Humvee.
Hey, hey, if I go to the hospital, I'll go in the back of that thing.
Load me up, man. Load me up. Load them up. Load them up. Wow. I didn't know that they all start at about 3,500. Dang.
I don't know what they actually sell for. Like, is there a list of like sold ones? I know this is kind of a rabbit hole, but I'm curious.
Let's see. Let's see if we can find the
That's
ones.
the Russian one. We'll forget that one.
Yeah, that's the Russian one, Bled. I don't know if we can find it. It appears that the highest price for an auction to start at is about $5,000. So I can't find the ones that did sell. Let's see if we can find on Truck Planet Humvees that have sold. This almost looks just like the other website. It's almost the exact same. But can't really see any that have just straight up sold. But still,
Are we getting an LSA Humvee now? Said Kolchak.
I mean, like, that would be kind of cool. I wouldn't ever spend that money on it. But let's take a look here. The AM General Humvee. They stopped producing them in 2021. I didn't know that. I thought they were still being produced. So let's check this one out. This one's for sale. They don't give us... Oh, they do give us the prices on some of them. This 2001 AM General Hummer with a 4-door soft top is $28,500.
Oh, geez, that's kind of steep.
Yeah, so you can get them for well, at least the starting price of the auction is a steal if you can get anywhere close to that price. But the running price of an actual Humvee in the open, normal world is actually kind of pricey. A lot more pricey than I would think it would be. But anyways, with that, we got to move on because this is just a rabbit hole of a weird kind talking about the support that the Ukrainians have gotten.
Man, wait, can you imagine paying $30,000 for a 2001 car with that many miles on it? That'd be nuts.
That would
I don't know why people are buying them at that high price.
Hell, I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, it would be smarter to go and get them at auction. And Paddington said, kind of expensive. That's what I was thinking. I was like, that's way too expensive, especially when you consider, and let me put this in, Humvee, and I'll just pull up the Humvee, and we'll go here. Especially considering that the Humvee's top speed is, let me find it, 55 miles per hour, or over 70 miles per hour at its top speed, probably going down a hill. It's like, that's a little expensive, you know, for a vehicle that can only do that much. I don't even know what kind of miles per gallon it gets while I slur all of my words tonight, which is great. I don't even know what kind of miles per gallon it gets or anything like that. And I've never really heard anything exorbitantly good about a Humvee from people who have driven one. They're like, it kind of sucks to drive. So I would definitely not spend $30,000 to get a Humvee, especially that's that old and has that many miles on it for that kind of price. Now, $3,500, oh yeah, I would get one. But at like $30,000, no way. No way in hell. But anyways... With that, we're going to be moving on into our last bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the Russian losses for today. 710 Russian soldiers have been killed over the past 24 hours. Another 23 armored personnel carriers have been destroyed as well, which is a fairly high number, especially considering the last week's daily average. 4 supply trucks have been destroyed. This appears to be becoming the new average. It doesn't appear that it's climbing much higher than that anymore. 21 tanks were destroyed over the past 24 hours. 2 entire battalion tactical groups. If you took all of the losses across all the front lines and just clumped them into some BTGs, 2 BTGs worth of tanks has been destroyed over the past 24 hours. An incredibly high number, and very rare to see numbers this high this late in the war. 8 artillery pieces have been destroyed. That's about 2 artillery batteries worth of artillery pieces that have been destroyed. An MLRS was wiped out. 3 anti-aircraft systems were also destroyed. And 3 Bobcat skid steers.
Hey, 3 for me.
3 for me. If you're from Alabama, you know what I mean. Anyways, we're going to go to the Twitter for Kyiv Independent because we're going to look at the casualty report on here and see if there's any comments on it, because I always want to make sure we do not miss those, because I know... Oh, look! Hey! Alabridge put one up! He put one up! And look, it's another one! Look, you will get a kick out of these numbers tonight. Hell yeah, we did. Hell yeah. And let's see. And it looks
Man,
like
if y'all keep doing this, we might get the Kiev Independent's attention eventually.
and right now, Matthew, the editors on the Kiev Independent are like, who the hell is this guy? And why in the world is everyone obsessed with these bobcats? Watch us get on like CNN or Fox or something going, I don't know, man. I mean, like, you know, we just like the bobcats and you know, and then they're gonna
Wouldn't
like,
that be messed up? Go ahead.
that would be no, go ahead, Matthew, because you said that would be messed up. There may be a way that I can jump off of that, so say it.
I was about to say, wouldn't that be messed up if we were brought on like national news for something like the Bobcats instead of like the 850,000 plus that we've raised? That would be messed up.
Well, that's what I would expect, and you could expect this, Matthew. If we go on CNN, they'd be talking about it's terrible over there. It's just absolutely terrible. The Ukrainians are going to get steamrolled any day now, and then. You know, if you go on Fox, you'd be sitting there with a confused dog asking us the questions, going, so do you think that there's a paradigm around the Bobcats or something like that? It'll be like, oh God, why did we come here? But anyways, incredibly good losses today. It's great to see that people are thinking of us whenever they see the Bobcat losses, and I think that's absolutely incredible. And on top of that, it's absolutely incredible to see the kind of losses that the Ukrainian armed forces were able to inflict on Russians today. These losses are incredibly high. Almost an entire battalion tactical group's worth of armored personnel carriers and 2 battalion tactical groups worth of tanks lost in 24 hours. The infantry losses are, of course, quite high. They are, in fact, higher than average U.S. losses over the course of the Second World War on a daily average, and they are higher than really everyone's average in the Second World War on the daily average, except for the Chinese and the Soviets, and those are a little bit of outliers, but still, absolutely incredible to see. Good to know that the Ukrainians are giving them hell, and hopefully we'll see here in the future that these numbers eventually come down to 0 because the war will have ended. We don't know when that will be, but hopefully it'll be within this year. With that, we're now going to be moving on from the casualty reports, and we're now going to be moving on not into the northeastern news. We're going to be hopping down real quick. We're going to be hopping down and knocking them around a little bit, Matthew, because we're going to Mariupol.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
You know what happened there.
Oh, bled. Bad things, bled. You see, Mariupol, last year, when the battle, the siege of Mariupol was ongoing at this very moment, it smelled of sulfur and it looked a lot like hell. A year later, hell returned because this time Putin drove a Toyota Land Cruiser from Sevastopol to Mariupol, at least from what we saw, and arrived in the town overnight. This was a surprise visit. No one really expected it, and everyone acted like that was really shocking that wasn't on his itinerary. But I, for some reason, don't think anyone realizes that that's also how the President of the United States showed up to Ukraine. It was completely unannounced, and he just kind of arrived there at one point, and that's also how Zelensky came to the United States. So, you know, I was like, well, that's not really that shocking, because getting that close to the front line or something that dangerous, they're not going to make it an announced ordeal. But anyways, he showed up to Mariupol, and he was talking to the residents. And of course, y'all know how this is going to go. So here's the clip.
Сколько раз видели.
Чего так надо же начинать знакомиться поближе.
See, everyone's so happy to talk to him. Everyone's just standing around kind of awkwardly.
А вы здесь живете или?
Вот у меня второй этаж, у них первый этаж.
Нравится?
Hey, wait a minute, hang on. Do y'all hear that woman screaming from a long ways away?
У них первый этаж.
Nравится?
Now, y'all
Sounds
know
like a
what,
heckler.
you know what that woman said?
What'd she say?
She said, "This is a lie, it's all for show." She yelled that from almost a block away at him. And you can see that Putin heard that, and then he was like, let me walk in a little bit closer to these people, and let's just pretend like that didn't happen.
Nравится?
She's brave for doing that.
Yeah, and so he's going to keep on going like nothing happened.
Адам у нас, кстати, у меня через 15 дней после вашего дня рождения мое. Тоже 70, но остался без ничего.
Теперь есть
Вот,
все.
ну, вот дали.
And I like how they gather up all the people, and it's like 10 people, you know, it's not even like a big amount of people. I mean, like, Mariupol was a city of 500,000 people, and they were so happy to see the quote-unquote liberators, as Putin would put it, that only 10 of them showed up. I mean, like, hell, this is worse than... this is worse than a lot of things. I mean, like, I haven't seen anyone get this low of a turnout ever. I can't think of anyone that got this much turnout in anything. And also, I like that they got them all and also put Putin in front of the only rebuilt apartment block in Mariupol. You know, the one that the Russians have lauded that had the cheap interiors that looked pretty crappy and kind of poor and shoddily built, but the outside looked kind of modern.
Yeah.
Yeah, they brought them all here and put them in front of that. So, you know, it's like, that's kind of a lame show a little bit. But it's good to know that there was a real one in the background yelling, "It's fake, it's all for show." And then Putin was like, "So how are the strawberries this time of year? Are they good?" And so with that, we're going to be moving on.
If this was his idea of leaving Russia to show the ICC that he can still travel, this was pretty lame.
Yeah, really lame. And even at that, it's not even in a foreign country. It's in occupied territory. So it's not like the Russians are going to throw cuffs on them in occupied territory that they control right now.
Exactly.
It's like, that's just stupid. But anyways, he not only did that in Mariupol, he also moved on to listen to a guy tell him raw lies. I've never seen lies like this before. The only lie that's gotten as bad as this one was the one where they said that the Ukrainians were the ones that attacked Russia, and so it's a defensive war to save the Russians. But what y'all are about to see here is the biggest lie that I have ever seen. Many of y'all were here on this channel to watch the Battle of Mariupol unfold, and watched us show a lot of videos of the fighting going on in the city, the soldiers that were a part of the Azov, and I believe it was I can't remember the name of the other unit. I think it was the 36th Naval Infantry Brigade, if I'm correct. But anyways, moving on from that, we watched the Russians fight block for block, street for street in Mariupol until they took the entire town. And what y'all are about to see right here is video footage of that battle that happened last year at the exact same time, overlaid on top of what this Russian soldier, or whoever the hell this guy is really supposed to be, telling Putin a story. And I'm going to read y'all the translation. So here's the clip. You know, Vladimir Volodymyrych, it is clearly visible what they've been doing. Where we carried out our offensive operations, bombing of residential areas did not happen. But from their side, quite the opposite. They were shooting directly on residential homes with their tanks. You can see how whenever they were retreating, they were bombing the residential areas. Inhabited residential areas? Yes. I, as a builder, can tell you, I've seen all those buildings. They targeted residential areas on purpose. No war was needed. They simply destroyed everything around themselves. This probably has been done by Nazis. Normal people wouldn't do such a thing. They targeted hospitals. Can you imagine?
Are they going to get an Oscar for that?
Yeah, they are. It's comfortable and pretty. What were you saying? Thank you for our victory. May God bless you with good health and happiness. But I love how they sat there and said that. And we just had the footage underlaid below it, showing that that was actually what the Russians were doing. And I love how Putin says, wow, this must have been done by Nazis, while we're watching the video footage of the Russians doing exactly what this guy is talking about, blowing up the residential buildings and attacking civilians outright. I mean, like, what? Did they forget that it was themselves that blew up the Mariupol theater that was filled with hundreds of families, with hundreds of children that were buried under that rubble and died there? I mean, hell, the Russians are such liars, and this is why you can't take anything they say with credit. I mean, like, they're going to sit there and say, and your eyes, y'all are seeing this crap. You can clearly see it for yourselves. The real video footage shows the Russians blowing up these buildings and blowing them away. And you can go back to months, a year ago at this point, and watch our streams and look at the maps we had on stream. Go to those video clips and watch the Russians carpet bomb the Azovstal. They carpet bomb the city. They barrage the city day in and day out. There is a cemetery outside of Mariupol filled with tens of thousands of civilians that were killed by the Russians. And yet they'll sit there a year later and just act like no one even saw this stuff. And they try and get the suckers by telling them the Ukrainians did this to their own people. Although we literally saw it happen, and there was the complete opposite. The Russians did this to the Ukrainians. And they're still doing it to the Ukrainians in Mariupol while he's gallivanting around and acting like they liberated them. It's pitiful.
Wait, real quick, before you jump off of this one, I saw Timothy Walker say the new Russian film is called Lie Hard.
Oh
my God, that's a good one.
Oh, that was a good one. I gotta say right there.
But seriously though, while we're still on this picture real quick, before you jump off of it, what kind of body armor is he wearing underneath that jacket? He is wearing something extremely thick underneath that.
Yeah, he is. And also, have you noticed that Putin, as time has gone by from the start of the war to now, he's looking more and more like Elmer Fudd?
Yeah, that I don't know if it's like a health problem or if it's actually a body double, but he's definitely like either put on some weight or like swollen up or something.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, looks like he's about to go and listen to this guy tell the story and go, eh, or something like that. I mean, he's not looking good anymore. I'll tell you, he never looked good, but he's certainly not looking good now. But anyways, as you can see, the Russians are once again going around spinning their lies. And you know, I just gotta have a little bit of an aside for a moment because there's people out there who for some reason have listened to this Russian BS, you know, BS like this, that if you pay attention, you can see that it's a straight up lie. I mean, you know, like we're literally looking at the videos right under here, and I'll mute it so that way we can watch them down here at the bottom. You're literally watching the Russian tanks right there, clearly marked with a Z, firing onto the residential buildings filled with people. You know, right there, you can see it firing. You can see the tank over there on the right hitting the building, still filled with people because no one was able to evacuate from Mariupol. You're watching all that happen, and yet somehow the Russians just believe that if they say something, people will believe it. And finally, and crazily enough, a small amount of people who I guess just don't pay attention or they just want to be on the opposite side for no reason, they eat this stuff up and believe it. And I think that either they're misguided, they're not paying enough attention, or something to sit there and think that this stuff is true. Because I don't even know what this is supposed to really be feeding into, rather than trying to keep the Russians thinking they're the good guys. Because, you know, this is being broadcast around the world, wherever it can be, wherever there's internet, it's being seen. And people are out there watching this and really believing, you know, the upper clip without the bottom one, really believing that the Ukrainians were the ones who were probably blowing up those buildings, killing tens of thousands of their own people just to make the Russians look bad, although it was the Russians that did it themselves. So pretty wild to see, pretty wild to think. And you know, it completely blows me away, especially when I watch videos like this and I sit there and think, I've actually run into a couple of people in real life who actually think that the massacre in Bucha, Hostomel, and Irpin was actually what the Ukrainians did to try and make the Russians look bad. It was a false flag, so that way they can make the Russians look evil. And hell, I mean, like, honestly, when you think about it, if people thought like that, people back in the day during the Second World War would have said, oh, the concentration camps filled with starving people, you know, who have also, there's just piles of dead bodies and skulls outside of these crematoriums on these facilities. That wasn't done by the Nazis. That was done by the Allies to make the Nazis look bad so that way they could hang them or something. I mean, you know, it's like, that's just outrageous, especially when you can clearly see this stuff. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from this. That's all I have to say about that. I'm just going to go in circles beyond that. But anyways, we're going to be moving on from Mariupol and seeing the devil down there. We'll probably see that Volodymyr Sololoviv, who is also the devil, will travel down there fairly soon now that the that Father Devil or Father Frost or whatever you want to call him has made his little trip down
Father
to
Devil.
Mariupol. Father Devil or Father Frost or whatever. He's made his trip to Mariupol, so we'll probably see Volodymyr also go down there as well. Anyways, we're now going to be moving into our Frontline news that's actually had locations marked and where we were able to find it. And, of course, we're going to be starting in the northeast and then working our way down into Bakhmut, where the sky pretty much opened up today. And there was a million videos that came out, although the Russians hardly made any ground at all. But with that, we're going to be covering the polls real quick. And we're going to be answering a couple of questions. But before we do, I thought I would make Matthew's job a little bit more difficult. I think it's time, Matthew. It's that time again.
Call a general order already.
It's time for a general order. General order number 14. If you have $5 to put into this fundraiser, put it in right now. We're going to get this thing over the goal before the first hour is over, and I'm going to be throwing in $20 to start off this general order. General order number 14 is in effect. If you have $5 to put into this fundraiser, put it in right now, because I'm putting in $20 and we're going to get this thing over the goal and we're going to help save kids in Ukraine through Save the Children. So I put in my $20 and so general order number 14 is now in effect. And with that, we're
general
now
order.
incoming, or whatever. But anyways.
Oh, you're gonna give people flashbacks over that one.
Oh, no. But anyways, with that, it's now time for us to get into the top donors. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so we are up to. Also, good evening to you. It's a Rome day every day. I can't type, so sadly I had to say it. But good evening. But it looks like we're up to $4,000 now. So, oh goodness. The donations are rolling in so fast. I'm trying to keep track of that while also looking at the spreadsheet. I'm not sure if it's possible. Unfortunately, let me know if a big one rolls in. So I might need to write it down.
Technical fool, 50 pounds.
Hey!
Hey!
All right, so I'm going to start calling off those donors, and Enforcer, just interrupt if you see another big one come in. It looks like we have a 250 from James Reyes, the biggest one of the night thus far, and thank you very much, James, for that.
Dude, put in a
we also
50.
have a... Hey! We also have a 200 from Just Chillin'. We have a 100 from Malachite. We have a 100 from Trista1, and also Jay
Mike
Burn.
G put in 75. Let's go!
Yay! We have a 100 from I Am. We have a 100 from the Enforcer. DCC Prime 1, Rad Doctor. Then we have a 50 from John Webster.
Hal Rose put in 100.
We have a 50 from Maximo Grullian. We have one from Rich Gomez, Ben, Greg Carrier, one from Noma, one from Naxus Fox, one from Good Boy Flyer, one from David L, Alan Nick,
Jimmer
Stephen Mentier,
McNoodle put in
Sylvester
50
the Cat.
pounds.
Also one from Dragoon 50. And there we go. I think that's all the top donors for now. I'm just checking the spreadsheet. It looks like that is it. And we're up to $4.8 thousand.
We are less than $100 away right now from reaching goal. And so if the general order keeps up steam, we'll be reaching the goal here in literally just a few minutes. And Paul Van Menin put in 20 euros, which is our most recent
4.9. Chugga chugga.
We're so close. Igor! And so...
Wait, Jason said IRS. Who? What, excuse me?
What? Oh, we reached the goal! Let's go!
Jugga jugga. Igor.
Let go. Let go. I guess you could say, we're the biggest bird. The goal has been reached
And
again.
I bounce.
And I bounced out. Not today. But we did it again. We've reached the goal one more time. $5,000.
Shout out to G-Man's watching who put in 100, and also David L that put in a 50.
And I got to thank you all so much once again for getting us to the fundraiser goal. $5,000 has been raised in support of Save the Children, and we'll, of course, be helping out Save the Children with that $5,000 and helping to save the lives of kids all over Ukraine and making sure that they do not end up dying or coming into the hands of the Russian aggressors that are currently still fighting and trying to invade the Ukrainian country. And so with that, great to see. Thank you everyone so much for donating already. Of course, the fundraiser is not over. If you want to donate, you still can, although we've reached goal. And if y'all want in the live chat, y'all can set whatever goal you want. We won't be raising the goal tonight. It will just stay at $5,000. But if y'all say, let's reach 6,000 or 7,000 or 7,500, feel free to do so and feel free to try and reach that goal, because the more support y'all give, the more lives are saved in Ukraine. And so with that, I hope that does address that fundraiser fairly well. And with that, let's get on into the polls.
All right, and also shout out to Woody Stems. He put in a 50 just a second ago, and thank you very much, Woody, for that support. We're up to $5.1 thousand on the fundraiser. So, also one from Robert Walsh as well. He put in a $101 donation. Thank you also, Robert. We're up to $5.2 thousand now that we mentioned it. Let me grab a couple things from the chat real quick. And Enforcer, you can go ahead.
And if he threw in a $101, does that mean that he threw in 101 donations? Is that like 101 Dalmatians?
I mean, it could.
I mean, maybe. But with that, it is now time for us. It's time for us to get on into those polls. So with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And also, remember tonight, no super chat. So if you have a question for us, put @EnforcerMatt before your question and send it in the chat, and I will add it to the spreadsheet. I only have 15 questions thus far, so I need a whole bunch more. So feel free to go ahead and send them in. And also, good evening to you, Hackster. And let's see here. Our first poll says NATO is stockpiling equipment along the Russian border and is building what some estimate to be a 300,000 soldier combat-ready force. And what are your thoughts? 52% said it's just a precaution, 40% said NATO is expecting war with Russia, 4% said unsure, and 4% said it's just talk. And on this one, I've got to say that if NATO is truly stockpiling equipment the way the reports are saying, and we're thinking about building a 300,000 soldier force to be readily deployable at any given time to fight against Russia, NATO must have some intelligence indicating that Russia has a much higher likelihood of actually expanding the war out from Ukraine and maybe into a NATO country like perhaps Estonia. And Finland's not in it yet, but they will be sooner or later, and that might be another potential place that a conflict could start as well. So kind of interesting. It indicates something bad might be on the horizon, but we don't know for sure. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think that it's not really showing anything major, considering that there was always a massive amount of NATO forces on the, I guess you say, Warsaw Pact border back in the day. It's really just more of a precaution, considering that tensions have risen, and making sure that if anything does happen, we are ready at the very moment it kicks off. Because instead of waiting for the Russians to launch an attack into the Baltics and then have us completely unprepared and trying to build up a force and supply that force to be ready to fight back against him, they are supplied and ready to go at any given moment. So I'd say that it's not showing that we're ready for a war, or we are ready for a war. It doesn't show we're expecting a war with Russia. It's just showing that in case if there is a likelihood of a war happening, we are immediately ready for it at that given instant. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Also, I have seen some people saying 300,000 is not a force that would be big enough to fight the Russians and win. The Russians would steamroll them. And I don't know why the hell people are still even saying that, considering that the Russians are getting rolled by the Ukrainians, and we have 300,000 guys from the NATO countries that are all equipped to the teeth with the most modern and advanced tech there is. 300,000 of those guys could take on the entirety of the Russian Navy, Air Force, and Army without even breaking a sweat. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says, at this point in time, how likely is it for a large global conflict to break out in the next year? It looks like 31% said it's more likely than ever, meaning 90%. 31% also said it's somewhat likely, meaning 60%. 24% said it's somewhat unlikely, 40%, and 14% said it's more unlikely than not, which is about 10% likelihood of a global conflict breaking out. And on this one, I've got to say it's somewhat likely. I'll say 60%. I wouldn't say it's 90% likely. That's a little too certain. There's too many uncertain aspects of this situation at the moment to say that. But with Russia doing what it's doing, and also all the other events, including North Korea and China, it seems like maybe something might be breaking out in the next year, but it's just too early to know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say, starting off, I want to thank Rustin Rott for putting in $100 Canadian dollar donation to save the children, and also Ash Van S, who put in $100 to the fundraiser as well. And also Dad Good for putting in 50 New Zealand dollars. I want to thank all of y'all for supporting the fundraiser, because now y'all gotten it up to 5.6. I mean, hell, we've already blown well over the fundraiser goal at this point. But to answer that question, it's an excellent question, Matthew, and I would have to say that a war in between the West and Russia is very low odds. Because the Russians, while they're always wanting to act like they're in an aggressive stance, watch and remember that response with that drone and how they immediately reacted. They accidentally collided with the drone, and they immediately said, "We're not wanting a war with the West. We don't want to touch y'all. We're so sorry. We apologize." They immediately did that. After all of that posturing and talk and the stance that they've been taking, once it got to a point where things could have escalated, they backed down immediately. And that shows that they are scared of getting involved in a war with the West, and for that reason, I think the odds of going to war with Russia would be next to none. Of course, the West doesn't really want to go to war with Russia, and we can see that beyond all of the bark, there is no bite behind Russian threats, especially when there was, once again, the chance to escalate. They backed down immediately. Instead of saying, "We hit your drone, we don't apologize, you shouldn't have been there," they said, "Sorry, we didn't mean to do that." So that shows that while they talk a lot, they're not going to back up that talk with anything. So I would say that a war with Russia and the West would probably be highly unlikely, in my opinion. And so with that, I hope I addressed
What about other countries, like maybe China and Taiwan and these other potential conflicts? How likely do you think those are?
I would say that a war in between China and Taiwan would be largely unlikely because, once again, the Chinese Navy isn't large enough right now to launch a successful landing on the Taiwanese island and create a successful ground war. They could conduct an air campaign, sure, but that air campaign would last so long to be able to create any kind of actual damage to Taiwan, or it may be a complete failure, that the ground invasion would never occur still. And on top of that, it would cause massive economic damage to the Chinese, most likely due to the sanctions and blocking of trade that we would have with them. Of course, that would damage the U.S. economy a decent amount. I wouldn't say greatly, and I wouldn't say it wouldn't damage us at all. It would be a moderate amount of damage to the U.S. economy to break the trade with the Chinese, but it's just not possible right now, especially when you look at a breakdown of the Chinese Navy, how large it is, what their landing forces could possibly pull off, what they can really transport. I mean, like, just to support a couple of, I believe it was when I went and did the number crunching, a couple of battalions invading Taiwan is just like, I think, 6,000 guys. It would take the entirety of the Chinese Navy to be able to conduct that, which is practically impossible. I mean, like, the whole Chinese Navy in one spot having to do one thing to get 6,000 guys on the shore with maybe a few armored personnel carriers and tanks to back them up, and those amounts of armored vehicles is incredibly small. That force would be wiped off the face of the earth before it even landed, and if it did land, then they would have to face down the entire Taiwanese army with just a few thousand guys and a handful of tanks. So in my opinion, it would be next to impossible for the Chinese to practically do that. And so while tensions were high last year and they've died down a good bit now, I would say that they're probably going to still stay very low in terms of tensions that they have in between the two countries again, and this will float on for probably another 6 or 7 years before it comes up again. But that's my opinion. You know, of course, a war could happen elsewhere. I mean, like, hell, honestly, I would say the most likely war to happen in the future would be a war in between the United States and Iran, because the Iranians do not have nuclear weapons. We, of course, do. It's a very similar situation that Iraq was in the 90s and early 2000s, that we're on bad terms with the Iranians. They don't have nuclear weapons. They're kind of in the process of maybe creating one, which is what we thought the Iraqis were doing in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I would say that if any war was most likely to happen, it would probably be a war in between the United States and Iran. But even then, that's still a bit of a stretch, because we seem pretty adamant on not going to war and trying to fight against Iran. And then there's also a whole bunch involved, considering that a landing force of ours would have to land on the shoreline of Iran, and it is incredibly mountainous and also completely desolate terrain in between southern Iran and the populated areas up here on its northern coast on the Caspian Sea near Tehran. So we would have to travel through hundreds of miles of pretty much nothing but incredibly mountainous terrain with no one living in it, with no strategic value, to actually get to the part of Iran that mattered. So I would say that that's also probably highly unlikely as well, but you know, I wouldn't rule it out. I would say that's probably the most likely one, in my opinion. But with that, I hope that does answer that question best I can. Good one, Matthew. And what do you think about that, actually? Let me ask you, what do you think about it?
I'll be straight up. I can't even really put a good thought into it. My mind's so busy in the chat right now. It's very busy. So many questions rolling in.
Oh man, I get no respect around here. I asked him to answer my question. He said he's too busy. Oh man, I'm telling you.
I'm just kidding, man. That's fine. And so with that, I hope we addressed that poll fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the third poll says, last night, Putin allegedly, a big emphasis on allegedly, made a visit to the Russian-occupied Mariupol after he went to Crimea, and what are your thoughts? 41% said it must have been a body double, 29% said he actually went there unannounced, 10% said unsure, and 20% said it could have been him. And I'm going to go with the 20% that say it could have been him. I am still not really sure about this whole body double situation. Putin definitely looks like he's added on some pounds, according to his face. Like he's looking a little bit chubby, or he's looking swollen, one or the other. Like Elmer Fudd. But I'm not really sure. But Enforcer, what do you think?
I would have to say, I actually think that is Putin. I'm going to be honest, because every time anything happens, everyone's every time anything happens, there's a decent amount of people who say it's a false flag, it's actually the other side doing this to make so-and-so look bad, or it's a body double or something. I mean, I can't I can't go through life questioning everything that happens and saying that it's a false flag and it's fake, because then you pretty much live in an alternate reality than the one we're seeing. And especially considering that this Putin is going around talking to people, shaking their hands, having actual meetings and stuff. This is a significant moment, especially for the Russians, I suppose. But this is the first time that Putin has ever entered the occupied territories of Ukraine, as in the war that started in 2021. I would have to say it's probably not a body double, because if that one is a body double, then the president of the United States that visited Ukraine recently was also a body double, and everyone's just using body doubles and no one really exists. Hell, we're body doubles, I suppose. But I would have to say,
no.
Lizard
gonna
men,
start conspiracies.
body doubles. And that's why they don't show their faces, Matthew, because we're actually deep fake AI. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses the poll, in my opinion, because I really think it is him. Body doubles are usually not put on camera much, and I saw a lot of people saying yes, they were last night, and then I never saw anyone give an example as to when a body double was on camera and was confirmed to be a body double. And it was a convincing body double where you actually thought that it was the real guy instead of a fake one. So I've got to be honest with y'all, I think it was the Putin. So with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well. I don't know why I said I think that was the Putin. And with that, we are on...
It's the Walmarts.
It's the Walmarts. like a certain president said in the early 2000s, I got on the internets and I looked at the Google. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next poll.
All right, and that was our last poll for now, but there are many, many more to go. And real quick, before we get to our questions, I want to shout out Mike Smith for putting in a $50 donation to the fundraiser. We're up to $5.7 thousand.
Hey, we just made it 5.8.
Hey, I don't even know how. I saw a 20 come in. Oh, big shout out to Hunter Stevens, I think it is, for putting in that 20 as well. Also, let's see here. Let's move on to those questions real quick. Yeah, got an intruder outside the door here distracting me. But anyways, the question from the live chat goes to Danny Coco, who says, how do Ukrainian artillery step-by-step accurately range targets so well?
That's a great question. The way the Ukrainians accurately target positions is mostly with drones. They use the drones, they fly them out, and the drones have coordinates on them that tells the drone operator exactly where the drone is on the interface that they're looking at the camera with. They can tell the artillery operators, well, actually they can estimate the range from the target to the drone in the air of the coordinates, and then they give a rough estimation of those coordinates to the artillerists, and that's usually why you see the first round fall off target, because they're trying to get a ranging shot. Also, thank you to Tristan, who just threw in $200 and got it up to $6,000.
Wow.
Nice! And so getting back to this, that's why the first shot always lands off. Magic Sky Girl just threw in 100, and Martin Van Owen just put in 50 Canadian. Hey! So now getting back to the question again, that's why the first shot is off, because the drone has some fairly accurate information inside of it about its coordinates, but they're trying to estimate the range to the target. So the first round falls off, the drone operator sees how far off that is, and then they put in almost at the exact coordinates to the target by saying, adjust a certain amount, and then they fire again. And usually that's why the second shot lands directly on the mark, and they are so dead on accurate, because usually it takes several shots, maybe 3 or 4 artillery shots, to get the rounds on target, and then that's when they start loading into it. With the Ukrainians, they've been able to get down the efficiency of their artillery where there is just about 1, or maybe in the worst instance, 2 ranging shots, and then the third shot will hit dead on the target. And that's how they've generally been able to get that deadly accuracy out of their artillery, is due to the incredible information, the high level of information, and the detail of it that they've been able to get out of their drone scouts that do the scouting for the artillery. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question fairly well. And also, I got to get back to this because I saw a lot of people contradict me. Well, actually, I guess you could say disagree with me in the live chat by saying that Putin was a body double that we saw in Ukraine. And someone said, well, the CIA, the ex-CIA director disagrees with the enforcer. I hate to hear that. I would change my opinion, but unfortunately, I'm not the ex-CIA director. I'm the enforcer, so I have a different opinion. I think that was the legit Putin, because And I got to say this, everyone ever since the beginning of the war has been saying that every single Putin has been a body double, except for the ones where he looks weak, and then everyone says, oh, that's the Putin. The Putin is looking bad on some days, getting pumped up with drugs on others most likely, and then coming out and looking like he's a little normal, and then there's this Putin that is traveling through Ukraine. And I think that's the real Putin. I mean, like, if he's fake and that's a body double, and if it is a body double, is the most convincing body double the world has ever seen, that means that Zelensky isn't in Kyiv, that's also a body double, and the president of the United States is nowhere to be seen. He's dead and he's inside of some kind of a frozen bunker, and the real president that we see every day on camera, he's also a body double. That's just my opinion. I mean, they don't put the body doubles front and center in front of the cameras, or they have to talk, they have to behave just like them. They're meant to be distractions. They're not supposed to be the main attraction like this one is. That's just my opinion. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And I'm not saying that I'm right and this guy's wrong, and I'm not saying that anyone who's saying he is a body double is wrong. I'm just saying that if, in my opinion, I work off of that, then I'm living in an alternate reality, because everything's not true, and anything could be the way it is. You just start bending reality to your will. So with that, I hope that answers that fairly well, and we are on to the next question.
And also, shout out to Gonzalo Guns for putting in a 50. We're up to $6,200 on the fundraiser. So doing excellent on that fundraiser. And the next question goes to, let's see here, Vorian174, who says, how long will it take for NATO to replenish ammo stocks?
From what I've heard, it'll take years, if I've heard that correctly, Matthew.
For NATO to replenish ammo stocks, I think for the explosives, like the artillery shells and things of that nature, I think the EU said it will be probably a few years before they can fully fix that situation.
I have a feeling that is probably the worst estimate, because it seems a little weird to me that Western countries, with the amount of money that we have and the amount of military spending that we incur, that it would even take European countries that, have somewhat smaller militaries years to replenish their ammunition stores. I find that a little hard to believe. I would assume maybe a year and a half would be the farthest out realistically, but if they're saying 3 years, it may actually be 3 years. So from what we know, that's how long it'll take for the Europeans to replenish their ammunition stores. But I think that it really could be sped up, and it can probably be done a lot faster than that, but it will be a little while. So with that, I hope that addresses that question fairly well, and we are on to the last one of this segment.
All right, and this one goes to Shine W, who says, how do you think the occupied territories will be repopulated after the war is over?
How do I think the reoccupied areas will be populated? I would assume that the people who lived there before, if they ever left the area and became refugees, would most likely... There's going to be several options, because there's never a clear option with refugees. Some of the refugees may actually prefer to stay where they are. Like if they ended up in Poland or Germany, they may just prefer to stay there. And you'll probably see that little enclaves of Ukrainian people will start to pop up in most of the major cities. Like, for example, in Berlin, and this isn't a refugee situation, this was just a situation that happened during, I would say, the 1970s to the 1990s or so. There was a lot of Turkish immigrants that left Turkey for temporary work in Germany, and they ended up staying in Germany permanently. And so there's a lot of Turkish culture that you can find in big German cities now. Like, for example, I believe there's hookah bars as one thing. There's a lot of Turkish food as well. And there's like Turkish enclaves in big cities like Berlin, where Turkish people just live, and they kind of were supposed to be there temporarily, and then they ended up staying around. So you could probably see something like that happen in Poland or Germany. It'll probably go a lot better in Poland, considering that Poland and Ukraine are both Eastern European cultures, and so Ukrainian people kind of blend in a little bit better in Poland than Germany. Germany's like the true divider in between well, really the border in between Poland and Germany in the modern world is kind of the divider in between Eastern European cultures and Western European cultures. Ukrainians will probably have such a distinct culture if they end up staying in Germany that they'll probably have enclaves similar to the Turks that still live in Germany. Some of them may prefer to return home, and a lot of them probably will end up being returned home because, one, the Germans and the Poles have made it somewhat clear that they can't really support refugees indefinitely, so they will most likely be trying to send them back to Ukraine. And Zelensky has also made it incredibly clear that the Ukrainian government wants the Ukrainians back, and so they will be putting pressure on the European countries to send them back, and the Europeans are more than happy to send a lot of the Ukrainians back, and so we'll probably see that most of them end up returning. But then that begs another question. Once they return, where do they go? And they could end up going back to the towns that they once lived in, like Melitopol, Mariupol, maybe Donetsk and Luhansk, if somehow people were able to flee from there in 2014. Or you may see that there is a mass urbanization of Western Ukraine, and Western Ukraine becomes incredibly populated, and the eastern areas of Ukraine become much like East Germany, where there's not really that much population density compared to the rest of the country due to economic hard times and also that area not really being able to recover. And then that's dependent, and this is a big rabbit hole, but that's entirely dependent on how much support do the Ukrainians get in rebuilding, because if they get a lot of support in rebuilding, you'll probably see that this area rebounds and in fact surges forward amongst the rest of Ukraine, and it becomes an industrial powerhouse of the country, and it's incredibly successful and incredibly modernized, but that entirely depends on support. So there's many ways that this could end up going, and it'll probably end up going in every single direction I've listed. There will probably be an urbanization of Western Ukrainian areas. This area will probably rebound, and you'll probably see a either massive amount of immigration from foreign countries of people wanting to work there, or you'll probably see that a lot of Ukrainians end up moving back there and working there while also urbanizing the Western areas. And then some Ukrainians will try and stay in the countries that they fled to, like Poland and Germany, because they may see better opportunities there for themselves than they had before the war. So with that, I hope that answers the question the best I can. And with that, that is the end of this question segment. And we're now going to be moving on into the northeastern area and the frontline news there. And so starting off with the last 24 hours, we've seen, of course, nothing really happened again. So now moving on into the video clips, just sounds of Svatove, we saw a Ukrainian drone dropping grenades. And so we're waiting for the video to load. And here's the video. All right, we're going to mute that. That sounded like tinnitus a little bit.
Yeah, it did.
When the artillery shell lands nearby. It's, oh, crap. But anyway, so you see the drone looking down on the Russians. We can see the bomblet on its way. And the bomblet. Bling.
Oh, Bliat. Got him on the shoulder now, did it?
Call this drone operator Tiger Woods, bled, because he's getting a hole-in-one, bled.
We can now see the drone looking around a little bit more, and we can see some Russians in a dugout here in the bushes.
What's he doing in there?
I don't really know. It looks like he's crawling over his friend or something. Yeah, he's crawling over his friend. A bomblet explodes right under him. You now see this guy looking up. He's going, oh! What the hell is that look? We now see them dropping another bomblet. It's an F1 grenade. Falls right into the dugout. Explodes inside of it. What the hell's the point of covering a dugout with tarps when they don't do anything?
They're hoping it catches the grenade, I think.
I got it. It's a giant catcher's mitt. And we can see some rustling, and it's a Russian. Oh, bled.
Take your time. Oh, they're goners.
What the? And now the cover that they had on their bunker is an obstruction to them getting out at all. When you see the one in the back climbing out, the other guy appears he's not doing that well. It looks like he might be taking a nap here soon. And it looks like he is, actually. And the other guy, he just said, screw my friend, I'm just going to walk off. Are they even really friends? Should I even say they're friends? Because they're really not. And when you see another bomb explode on top of a Russian, and it looks like this guy, well, yeah, he's still digging for turnips or something. I don't know.
Why he's reacting to that like it was like a flashbang grenade or something.
He's like, oh, bleh, that was
Oh,
loud.
just a little minor inconvenience I can't see.
We see another Russian foraging in the tree line, and with that, that's the end of the video. And it looks like the Russians are still getting had in the northeastern area, although not a lot of I guess you could say happenings are occurring on the front line. With that, we're moving on to the next one, where we saw the 80th Separate Brigade also firing at the Russians. So let me wait for the Steam notification to go away. There we go. And now we got to mute it again anyways. So we now see him taking his helmet off and moving around the SPG. We can now see him getting inside. We now see them firing the SPG. We see the smoke coming out of the breach. We can now see the target they hit further down range, most likely from the drone spotter. We can see them hitting another target. We can now see one of the soldiers talking about his experience in the artillery unit. We can now see his phone, which was blurred out. We can now see them loading the SPG with shells here. We see the man we started at the beginning of the clip once again. We now see them going through the loading process, trying to get the ammunition inside of the 2S1.
Nice knife.
A very nice knife. It looks like a K-bar, really.
Maybe an old-looking one.
Maybe an old one. Maybe. Matthew's a bit of a knife schnob. he's a bit of an old
A little bit.
We now see the Ukrainian soldier continuing to talk. Astral said, knees weak, arms are heavy. Open up the
Whose
door.
are?
Mom's spaghetti. We can now see the target once again burning down range. See it smoking and brewing up quite nicely. Kenny Knows Twinskin said, that's not a knife. I swear, that looks a lot like a knife. I mean, it looks like a knife to me.
A whole lot like a knife to me, but
I mean,
I'm no expert.
You know, I don't want to sound like an expert or a know-it-all or anything, you know, because, you know, I don't know everything, but that looks a lot like a knife to me. I mean, like, it could be something else. It could be a curling iron. It could be a hair dryer. But it looks a little bit like a knife to me, you know. And I'm not saying I know everything, of course. You know, I might be wrong.
Candy Nose got me thinking, I get no respect around here. I get no respect.
I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I said, hey, that's a knife. And he said, hey, whoa, watch it, bud. Oh, man. Oh, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. And that's what this guy is talking about. He's like, man, I get no respect around here. I got this thing on top of my walkie-talkie. Oh, man. Candy Nose Twinskin said, it's a movie quote. Oh, man. I get no respect around here. I get no respect. I sat there and said, I think that's a knife. And he said, I think it's a movie quote, you idiot. Oh, man. Oh, terrible, terrible. We can now see the guy down in the trench, and he's going, man, I get no respect around here. They only give me one light bulb down here. One light bulb. How in the world's a man supposed to read with this? Oh, man, it's terrible. Here's the phone again. Oh, man. We can now see him on the radio. Oh, boy, I bet you he's calling up for a ham sandwich or something for Kamarov. Oh, man.
We now see them firing the SPG again. And with that, that's the end of the clip. But once again, a look at the artist.
Just a quick shot of a very happy fellow after the thing fired.
And so that's the end of the clip. But there's the 80th Separate doing its job. We're now going to be moving on down into the area of Berestove, north of Bakhmut, where we saw the Ukrainians destroy an ammo cache. I see a lot of people asking for Rodney to stop. So apparently there's about like a 10-second tolerance time on Rodney. People love Rodney if he's only around for about 10 seconds at a time. So with that,
Ah, she's a small group. Keep him going.
Man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. I let my actual self out, and people go, "Hey, that looks terrible. Put that thing back away." Oh man, I'm telling you, I'm so ugly. Eh? The dog catcher came around and put me back in the pound. Oh man, and I used to go there as daycare as a kid. My parents said, "Oh man," and they told me this. They really did. They told me I was so ugly that I had to go to the dog pound to go to daycare. And oh man, the dogs didn't even like me too. They thought I was real ugly. Oh man.
anyways,
The fundraiser, and he might turn off Rodney.
oh look, someone hated it so much, OBS went off.
Oh man,
Oh, damn.
I get no respect around here. The impersonation was so terrible. OBS turned off on me. Oh man, oh terrible.
It's moving on from this one and on down into Bakhmut itself, where it's time to go over the last few hours and also to talk about what that thumbnail and title is about. Over the past 24 hours, you can see that Russian forces have only been able to take about another quarter of one field right here and move forward a couple of yards in just about every direction. Once again, very similar to the previous few days. And it appears that, according to Ukrainian commanders, and I'll get this right here, this guy's actually a general here in this area of the front lines, and this is his quote, "The Russians tactically failed the operation in Bakhmut. They cannot complete either the encirclement or capture of the city." And this is from the spokesman of the Eastern Group of the Armed Forces of Ukraine in Cherevati. And so it appears that Ukrainian commander has pretty much said that the battle is over and we're watching the end parts of the battle play out. And the Ukrainians have won, but barely, on holding the city of Bakhmut. Of course, they won in every other aspect. The only one that was in question was whether they would be able to hold the city once the battle came to its end. And according to this commander, the battle is ending right now, and they were able to win in every single category, including holding Bakhmut still. And so, pretty impressive to see. Pretty wild to think, too, that the commander is confident in saying that. And I'll have to be honest with y'all, we can't say definitively yet that the Ukrainians have won the Battle of Bakhmut, considering that there were a small amount of advances still today. It shows that the battle may be going on a little bit longer, but we'll have to see if the Russians eventually exhaust themselves. Will Bakhmut still hold? Because if it does, this commander's correct. Ukraine did win in Bakhmut. And we may have already seen that right now, but of course, I still want to give it a few days because I feel like that may be a little optimistic to say that they have won right now. We'll give it a few days or maybe 2 weeks and see if they still end up holding Bakhmut. And in fact, if there's anything that even counters what the Russians have done and retakes some of the area, and then we'll say whether the Ukrainians have won the Battle of Bakhmut or not. The second battle, that is. With that, we're now going to be moving on into Yehidne, where we saw Russian artillery landing nearby to a Ukrainian position.
Пизда нахуй, грязь, блядь. Куда, блядь? Осколки теперь падают.
We see the smoke of the artillery rising up in the distance. We hear a round exploding
Твою
nearby.
мать, блядь. Ебать, дай Боже, чтоб сюда попал. Ебать!
And the artillery shells are incredibly close.
Фу, сука. Будь ласка.
I mean, they're coming in like clockwork.
Умоляю.
Damn, they're getting closer.
He's really composed for this situation.
Боже, поможи.
So you see them still waiting out the artillery barrage.
Somebody said he's breathing real stressed. If that's all he's doing there in this situation, I mean, he's a trooper.
Not bad at all. I mean, like, he handled it like an absolute champ. And very interesting to hear how close that barrage got and how intense it was. It was at least 10 rounds that landed on just almost on top of them. And the Russians are supposed to be incredibly low on ammo. So I'm guessing that this is one of the full-scale barrages well, at least a small full-scale barrage that they've been able to conduct recently. With that, we're now moving on into our next clip inside of the interior of Bakhmut, where we saw the Ukrainians hitting the Wagner with the RPG. And of course, they put music over a combat video, so we have to mute the music. We can see the soldier moving up with an RPG, and we can see that they've already hit the chimney. Actually, it looks like he's aiming it now, and he's about to fire his RPG. Straight through the window, blowing up about a quarter of the house, and now he turns around and runs off as another soldier comes up with another RPG, and also fires that one into the building. You now see him firing, and he also takes out the other quarter of the building, so now the building is only half there. With that, that's the end of the clip, but a little bit of a look at the Ukrainians firing and directly onto the Wagner in the area of Bakhmut. We're now going to be moving on into the next bit of news, a little bit behind the lines. Also, Matthew, I can hear you typing over there. And we can see here that some Ukrainian soldiers were firing at the Russians in another part of town. And so, here's the clip. So we're going to have to mute it, but you can hear the rounds coming in and bouncing or flying around right near him. He's now looking back at the Russian again with his gun. It looks like he's looking over to the right. He's now aiming the rifle again, looking into the distance. And it appears that he may be trying to line up a shot right here. He's looking around a little bit more, scanning the area. He's still scanning the area. He's looking, and now he's firing his rifle. Fired off one shot. He's now firing off a second. His shots are very slow, and it looks like he's trying to really aim them. So we may be able to tell that the target's a good distance away. It may be a machine gunner he's shooting at because the amount of fire that was being directed towards him was quite high and very rapid. We now see him switching out magazines and reloading his rifle.
It's a nice gun.
It is a nice one, I have to say.
Long barrel, long snoot.
We can now see him still sitting there at the same spot. Appears that the twig was hitting his face, so he looked at it for a second like, what the hell's that? Now he's looking back out there again. Still sitting in the same spot. Looks like he's fiddling with a magazine right now. He's now aiming the rifle again and looking into the distance. And it appears that he's aiming at this large apartment block right here. Maybe he's trying to get people who are in the windows. He's now firing again. Very controlled shots, probably trying to guide them in, clean in through the window openings. And now we can see him moving on at the end of the clip, repositioning, but that's the end of the video, and once again showing what appears to be a Ukrainian marksman firing at Russian soldiers that have found themselves inside of an apartment building, which may be the last one they ever go in. We're now going to be moving on down to the southern end of the center of Bakhmut, where we saw some Ukrainian soldiers launching man-pads at an SU-25 again today. Once again, it was the 93rd Brigade that fired off this man-pad, and we can see it right here. Now, spooling it up, he's aiming it. Can't really see the SU-25, but the man-pad does, and he fired off the missile, and it's now on its way. They're now getting out of the apartment after packing up their man-pad, well, actually dropping their man-pad, and now they're getting out of there. And so with that, that's the end of the clip, and we don't know...
Could you imagine leaving your apartment, like, and thinking, okay, I'll be coming back soon, and then you see this guy, like, launching a man-pad out of your apartment.
And then you hear all the pots and pans in the background just getting shattered by the bag blast.
And that whirring sound is the gyro spinning up, isn't it?
I believe that's actually the missile system saying that there is a lock. I believe that may be what that is. Well, let me listen to it again. That right there, I think, is the sound of the little gyro thing or whatever it is. And then that sound lets you know that the missile has made a lock and it will fire. So with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on into the next one, a little bit inside of the city, where we saw Ukrainian soldiers wandering around and showing us the level of destruction that Bakhmut has endured. And so, of course, the same songs. We're going
Same song.
It goes something like, for the City of Bakhmut, or something like that. I've heard it a million times now. But anyways, you see the soldiers wandering through, and you can see that Bakhmut is looking very similar to Mariupol at this point, way earlier on in the war. The destruction has become almost a part of the cityscape itself that you can't escape. Debris and rubble everywhere, buildings collapsed right down the middle. It's absolutely hell on earth. Almost similar to Stalingrad. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but once again showing the level of destruction that you can find in the city of Bakhmut. With that, we're now going to be moving into the background near Khromove, where we saw the evacuation of a wounded soldier by Ukrainian forces. Not really much to add here, and we're going to have to mute it. But we see them loading on the wounded Ukrainian soldier. We can see, of course, it is a fairly laborious task, taking up a large amount of Ukrainian manpower, about 5 guys total to transport the one wounded guy. Of course, this is incredibly impressive, considering that the Ukrainians would divert this amount of manpower to getting out a wounded man, considering the Russians, who are supposedly far superior in numbers, do not divert this amount of guys to carry stretchers with their own wounded soldiers on them. We now see that they've crossed a small river. This may be the Bakhmutkova River in the middle of the city. They're now taking him across this small dirt path. We see that they may be setting down the stretcher for a moment. We now see them once again trudging through the mud, and that's the end of the video, but absolutely incredible to know that the Ukrainians have massive amounts of manpower, from what it seems, dedicated to getting wounded soldiers off the battlefield, which is something that the Russians do not even give their soldiers the luxury of. We're now going to be moving on from that clip and on into our next one from the Bakhmut area in Ivanivsky, where we saw the 93rd firing at the Russians again. This time with a tank. So we can hear some kind of music.
Something else.
Yeah, that's something else. That's a little new. When you see the tank firing right across the bridge.
Oh. Nice dust trail on that one.
Dust trails on every single one of them. That's pretty interesting.
It was orange.
You now see the tank repositioning itself and now turning around and making its way off the battlefield. Now we can see it firing again. Apparently that was a clip from another time. Now we see it firing at the same location again, blowing away the houses. Close to the bridge and farther away from the bridge. And we can see them showing one of those shells hitting the building. They're most likely just simple high explosive shells. They're not using armor piercing or anything like that. The intent is to use this as almost a cannon, a direct line of sight, like a direct firing cannon. With that, we're now going to be moving on from that clip and into our final clip in Bakhmut, where we also saw the 3rd Brigade hitting the Russians far in the south, near the area of Klishkivka. Also, we have to mute this one as well. Music in every single one of them. And you see the Russian soldier sitting right there. We can see another one sitting right there, taking a nap. Oh, quite nice naps. We can see, a 3rd and a 4th one. They're even giving them the outline and everything. A 6th one? Oh. Looks like they've been doing some work. And 8th and the 9th one. A 10th, 11th, and not a 12th one. I thought there was a 12th one, but only 11. 12th. The 13th.
Well, the Russian army's gotten very civilized. They allow naps on the battlefield.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's almost like kindergarten again. Nap time. Which is what some of our haters say we are. They say we're 12-year-olds, so I guess it is nap time. Night.
Hey!
18. And you know what the average age of a soldier in Vietnam was? 19. 19. And it looks like 21. There's the 22nd one. And actually the 23rd one as well. And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But there you have it. The Russians, once again, have taken some incredibly high losses in the middle of a field in the middle of nowhere. We're now going to be moving on out of the Bakhmut front. Of course, the videos explain the situation in its own right. And we're now moving on down to the area of Novoselivka, where we saw 3 Ukrainian tanks have been stuck in the Rasputitsa mud in the area. Rasputitsa mud is incredibly difficult for any vehicle to handle, and no matter whether they are experienced drivers or not, tanks will get stuck in the mud, and we can see that 3 Ukrainian tanks have ended up getting stuck inside of the sunflower field somewhere in the Donetsk Oblast.
Someone smoky.
We can see one of them is smoking the meats. We're about to pull out the Sweet Baby Rays, and we can see another one turning on its engine.
Someone just sat there flooring it in the mud, apparently, and messed the engine up.
We see them all trying to put their combined efforts together to get out of the mud, but to no avail. They'll most likely have to wait for a recovery vehicle to then pull these vehicles out. And Jack Brown says, please stop the voice. We haven't done a voice in like 20 minutes. Either he's watching a stream way back in the day, like way back in time, or that was out of context, apparently. Anyways, we can see they're still not able to get out of the mud. Try best they can. The mud's pretty rough to get out of, and now, finally, we're seeing a small amount of movement as they're able to pull all of them out of the mud in one large line.
Man, this looks like Beijing on a Monday morning with all the smog.
What's up, Beijing?
This would make a Southerner proud.
They rolling coal, my boy. More like they're rolling like rolling wood smoke or something, because it's not black enough for coal smoke.
Put it in first, Cletus. Gun it.
We're mudding today. I mean, you can see how deep these tanks are getting in the mud. I mean, like, they are deep in that mud. But with that, that's the end of the video, and you can see that the mud is a massive challenger for these tanks on both sides. Also, a huge shout out to Steve Watkins, who just threw in $100 to save the children. He be saving those kids, you know what I mean? And so
another shout out to Gonzalo Guns, who put in another 50 earlier.
Hey! Hey! And so with that, we're now moving on down into the Avdiivka area, where we also saw how the Ukrainians have been geolocating the Russians in real time.
Ага, вот так. Есть?
Вот здесь проходит прямо под ним.
Wait a minute. Car antenna? Someone pointing at a screen? Medyar?
On an
Выход
HP?
идет два выхода.
That's not Medyar. Doesn't sound like Medyar. And I'm also going to have to mute it because it has music. And we're scared of music. We don't like music. We can see the Russians down there on the thermal camera. You can see all of them. Wow. That guy's got like an all-black kit, all-black vest, all-black helmet. That's pretty interesting. Never seen that before. And now you see all their bomblets. We can see some more ammunition inside of these spam cans. And with that, that's the end of the video. But there you have it. That's how they find the Russians, with thermal imaging. We're now going to be moving on to our next clip, courtesy of Radio Free Europe, showing us what the Battle of Avdiivka looks like, which the Ukrainians claim is one of the largest battles at the moment outside of Bakhmut. With that, here's the clip. Waves of Russian attacks continue daily on Ukraine's Donetsk front. Ukrainian forces call the Avdiivka area one of the hottest battle zones. Only Bakhmut has seen more intense fighting. Avdiivka is just behind the front line. It's a dangerous place. The city has been badly hit. The military claims they can hold the line here. We see some of the damage to the city of Avdiivka, to this apartment building. We see a cat wandering its way through. In my opinion, the Russians use aerial tactics just to ruin the city, to wipe it out. They use FABs, frontline air bombs, which are destroying buildings, factories, and unfortunately, people. Does it make sense to use FABs from the military perspective? Because they use these, it seems like they don't have brains at all. What they're doing is absolutely senseless. You can hear what's happening yourself. I still don't understand why they're doing this. Well, you see more of the destruction may be caused by the fab bombs that they were talking about. That's how it is here in Avdiivka. Shells, most probably from the Grad missile systems, are flying towards positions of the Ukrainian troops. The city is completely destroyed, but despite this, there are locals who have still stayed. Some lived in ruined apartments, some live in the basements of their houses. But everybody's scared. Everything looks really scary here.
Тут справді все настільки страшно виглядає. Щоденно
There are explosions from airborne bombs, grad systems, and artillery every day here.
Градів, артилерії. Авдіївка дуже.
Avdiivka is ruined. This is horrifying. We now see a woman making a trek down a road with a whole bunch of stray dogs. Everyone is firing.
Poor dog.
Shots come from both sides. Shells are flying back and forth every day. How do you survive in such conditions? I need to live somehow. Are you scared? We're used to it by now. But it's scary to see how people are being killed. The biggest problem is that the enemy has unlimited ammunition. So because of that, it's hard for our guys to plan any kind of operations and actions. If powers were equal, the course of the war would change pretty fast. Russian fighters and armor are focused on regaining territory in the Donetsk province. But Ukrainians are holding vital rail and road supply lines. Courtesy to Rave for Europe for providing that little clip, and once again a look at the Battle of Avdiivka, which is one of the heaviest fought in the area now. Vulhedar was once larger than Avdiivka, but as the war has continued, Avdiivka has overtaken Vulhedar in the amount of activity that's occurring in the area, although there's hardly any frontline movement on a day-to-day basis to show the intensity of the fighting going on there, and also any video footage to corroborate that fighting as well. With that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines near Ilovaisk, where we saw the Russians transporting in more T-62Ms to replace the heavy losses that they've been taking in the armor. When you see the T-62 passing by on a transport truck right there. And we can even see a second one following that one close behind. Once again, showing the lack of armor that the Russians have and the desperate measures that they're having to take to try and keep this war effort running. We're now going to be moving on back towards the front lines and in the area of Marinka, where we saw the 54th Brigade in action in the Marinka zone. We may have to turn this down if the music gets louder, but we can see the soldiers spraying the Russians in front of him, and now getting back down into his bunker for a moment. We're going to have to mute it real quick because I can tell that music's about to go full-fledged. We can see these soldiers sitting around in the bunker, trying to figure out what is going on and what they'll be doing. You now see the soldier having to pull out a cartridge. Well, a box of ammo.
Is that ammo in bags?
Yeah. Have you ever gotten Russian ammo before, or Ukrainian, or I guess, you know, Soviet-era ammo? It always comes in these little weird, like, paper, like, cartridge things. And you have to, like, peel them open. It's literally, like, just, I guess, like, shopping bag paper is the best way to describe it. You have to peel the stuff open and get the bullets out of it. Because back when I had that Mosin, all the ammo I bought for the Mosin always came in those weird little, like, paper pack things.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. And we can see him here loading his magazine. It appears that he may have fired all the ammunition in all of his magazines, so he's having to reload one.
I agree, Alex. I do need speed loaders.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, I agree with you. I was like, yeah, a speed loader would be nice for him, wouldn't it?
As we can see, the Ukrainian soldier is reloading his weapon. We can now see him throwing the garbage around onto the ground.
Litter.
So that way the Russians think that it is actually their home. But alas, it isn't. Introducing the Ukrainian infantryman. An absolutely scary creature. One that roams around at all given times of the day. An apex predator. Very dangerous to the Russians. We can now see...
Fast ammunition, comrade.
We can now see the Ukrainian soldiers spreading the ammunition amongst each other. Much like ants, the Ukrainians operate as a community of sorts, making sure to provide each other with the proper kinds of equipment and supplies to keep them alive. We can now see the Ukrainians speaking in voices. This is a common courtesy of Ukrainian soldiers and the best way that they communicate. Russians, unfortunately, do not have any form of communication. Language is something that the Russians have not really battered down too much. We can now see one of the Ukrainians entering deeper into the burrow. Burrows are common for Ukrainian soldiers, as they usually make them as homes, even sometimes being luxurious enough to have dwellings and kitchens inside of them. We can now see a community gathering of Ukrainian soldiers. This is incredibly common near a burrow as they plan out their next intentions.
Oh man, YouTube says they detected copyright content with that voice.
Is that so?
No.
I was about to be like, are you kidding me? We can now see a drone looking down at the Russian soldiers. This is a special subspecies, or pet as they call it, that the Ukrainians carry around with them. Much like the fish that follow a shark, these drones provide critical information to the Ukrainians on the ground and can be considered a mutualistic relationship. We can now see the Ukrainians closing in on the trench for the kill, and it looks like they got a meal. We can now see another timid and scared Russian cowering inside of its bunker, inside of its trench works, making sure to protect itself from the dangers further down. But alas, the drone has been able to spot this unfortunate Russian and will guide his Ukrainian friends onto this area. We can now see the Ukrainians closing in on this Russian. It may be this Russian's final moments before he succumbs. A Ukrainian lobbed a grenade, a special trait of the soldiers. It missed the Russians. The Ukrainian now looks over the trench, ever so spying for the Russians, and it appears that he may have been able to secure himself the kill. The drone now tries to rearrange itself to get the best view on the Russian as possible, as the position is backed up by another mutualistic creature, the tank. It appears that the Russian has finally succumbed to the voice of the Attenborough, and it appears that they are making sure that the Russian will not be able to make its way. The Ukrainians now share a luxury amongst the hive, a cigarette. The cigarette is a morale booster for the otherwise happy Ukrainians, making sure to keep their spirits high and their emotions subdued. With that...
And those are the Ukrainian variant, the Lucky Strike. Unlike the Russian variant, the Unlucky Strike. Smoke irresponsibly, comrade.
And with that, that is the end of the clip from the K2 unit. absolutely incredible from start to finish. And of course, the story of our planet. Animal Planet.
It's actually not Animal Planet. He does voicing for the BBC. Anyways.
Animal Planet, that's an insult.
Yeah, with that, we're moving on down into the Vulhedar area, where we saw several BMPs get destroyed today. Oh, gotta mute that.
Oh, yeah.
We see the BMPs exploding one by one. And a lot of people really enjoyed that voice. I didn't see a lot of people getting tired of that one, which was really interesting. But we can see all of them getting hit. This one appears to have just been hit. It may have been a grazing shot right there.
That thing is moving out. Oh!
Oh!
And we had a blowout on car number 2.
And it comes to a dead stop. You can tell the transmission probably just shredded itself in there because that thing came to a dead stop. We now see Russians running
rolling.
off. They see me rolling. They
that man is like Usain Bolt taking off.
And so with that, that's the end of the clip. But once again, the BMPs got had near Vulhedar. We're now going to be moving further down the line and into the Kherson area. And we're going to have to speed up these clips a little bit, so I won't be providing a lot of commentary. This clip shows a picture of a Russian truck, a Typhoon K, fairly expensive, worth $1.5 million, sitting sideways in a swamp. Quite nice. In the next picture, we also saw a EOD team has gotten some new vehicles in the Kherson area, and will be using them to clear mines from the fields in the nearby region. Very nice to see, and apparently they got 2 of these things, which is also even better. The more the merrier. And in this final clip here, we also saw 2 truck MLRSs firing off near the Novokhakovka area. So I'm going to have to mute it because there's music in the background, but we see him giving a little bit of a speech before the Toyota trucks fire.
Or those may be Mitsubishi trucks. The difference between the species is incredibly hard to tell.
But we now see them firing. Man, Moten Gator came in and slaughtered me. He said, "Enough with the bat." Oh, man, he got oh man, that's the end of the clip. And that is the end of today's news. And of course, coming right off of a successful fundraiser, being able to raise $6.6 thousand for Save the Children, an incredibly impressive nonprofit that saves the children of Ukraine. And of course, it is great to know that the fundraiser has raised so much and will be able to help out so many kids that are in Ukraine. And so, without further ado, here's the speech from the one, the only, President Volodymyr Zelensky.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Завершується ще один тиждень нашої оборони проти держави зла. Ще один тиждень, коли щодня, щоночі російська армія обстрілювала українські міста, села, вбивала наших людей. Кам'янське Запорізької області, Береслав Херсонської області, Марганець Дніпропетровської області, Авдіївка, Краматорськ, Костянтинівка Донецької області, Костянтинівка Сумської області, ще десятки українських міст і сіл, які зазнали ударів російських терористів за цей тиждень. Один тиждень. Мої співчуття усім, хто втратив рідних, своїх близьких. За кожен прояв терору проти українців держава зло відповідатиме. Цей тиждень, що минає, нарешті, приніс дійсно вагомий міжнародний правовий результат для України. Для справедливості є ордер Міжнародного кримінального суду на арешт керівника Росії. І це поворотний момент, після якого стає безсумнівним, що завершенням цієї агресії для Росії буде повний спектр її відповідальності. Відповідальності за кожен удар по Україні, за кожне зруйноване життя, за кожну депортовану українську дитину. Звичайно, за кожен прояв дестабілізації світу, що стало наслідком російської агресії. Цими днями наша благодійна платформа United24 перетнула межу у $300 мільйонів внесків від людей з різних країн світу, понад сотня країн, тисячі донорів, звичайні люди. приватні компанії, які допомагають купувати дрони для наших військових, машини швидкої, ремонтувати лікарні, інфраструктури. Це одна українська благодійна платформа, одна серед різних ініціатив, які всі разом консолідують світ. Світ розуміє, що відбувається, світ бачить, як сміливо і шляхетно борються наші люди, і саме тому нам вдається мобілізувати підтримку і провідних держав, і мільярдів людських сердець по всьому світу. Дякую кожному і кожній, хто вірить в Україну і хто допомагає нам повертати безпеку. Хочу окремо відзначити наших людей, які знешкоджують залишені окупантом міни, російські боєприпаси, що не розірвалися. Це щоденна, кропітка і дуже небезпечна робота. Від початку повномасштабної війни нашими піротехніками і вибухотехніками обстежено вже більше 100 тисяч гектарів територій. Вдалося знешкодити понад 400 тисяч ворожих снарядів, понад 200 тисяч вибухонебезпечних предметів вже вилучено. Я дякую всім, хто здійснює цю роботу. А особливо відзначу піротехніків ДСНС Олександра Дворецького із Тернополя та Романа Шутила з Луганщини, які майже 6 місяців поспіль працюють на Херсонщині, повертаючи безпеку українцям. Дякую вам. Дякую Роману Радовчуку з Київщини, який працює на Миколаївщині, розміновуючи об'єкти енергетики. Дякую Василю Поповичу із Чернівців за розмінування в Донецькій області, Євгену Захарову із Києва за розмінування в Харківській області. Бажаю якнайшвидшого одужання Євгену, Мельнику, Андрію Маковійчуку, Віталію Руденку, Володимиру Хлєвчуку, Владиславу Баку. Це піротехніки ДСНС, які розмінували територію Херсонщини і отримали поранення. Дякую вибухотехнікам нашої поліції Андрію Ільківу, Тарасу Сало, які працювали в деокупованих районах Київської і Харківської областей. Дякую Анатолію Чечельницькому за розмінування на Миколаївщині. Дякую Ігорю Заволотньому, Тетяні Кузубовій, Валерію Онулу, Марині Островській, В'ячеславу Яровому за розмінування на Харківщині, Донеччині, Чернігівщині, Херсонщині, Київщині. Дякую саперам Національної гвардії України і наших Збройних сил. Вигнати окупанта, очистити нашу землю від усіх слідів держави зла, покарати терористів – це наші завдання, які ми виконаємо. Ми, українці, у єдності і світ у єдності. Слава усім, хто зараз боює за Україну, хто б'ється на Донеччині та Луганщині, хто захищає наш південь, хто тримає наш кордон. Слава усім, хто готує деокупацію наших земель. Вічна пам'ять усім, чиє життя забрав російський терор, російські бомби, російські міни. Слава Україні!
And so with that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 389 of the war in Ukraine. And of course, that is the end of tonight's news segment. I thank you all so much once again for watching this news. If you all have enjoyed, we're about to be moving into the question segment and answering as many questions from the live chat as we can. There are not any super chats tonight, so if you threw in a question in the live chat, there's a pretty good chance it'll probably be answered tonight. So with that, make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to comment, because that helps this channel to keep on going. Even if it isn't anything positive, like, hey, the voices suck. You might get banned, but hey, it helped us out in the algorithms, right?
Hey!
So with that, we're now moving on into our polls, and then once we cover the polls, we'll be moving straight into the questions.
All right, so before we get into our polls, big shout out to Bill Franz. He put in a $66 donation, and thank you very much for supporting Save the Children. And we're up to $6.7 thousand. So I'm sure it'll go a little bit higher for the nights out, but great job and big thanks to everyone for supporting the fundraiser tonight. It's another successful one, I'm glad to say. So the very first poll we have says, reports say that the EU is facing an explosives shortage, meaning gunpowder, etc., and is the EU ready for war? 70% said they need to get that fixed ASAP, 7% said unsure, 13% said that's probably the worst case scenario, and 10% said it's not a big deal, no rush. And I think they should get that fixed as soon as they can. No need to hold off on fixing it. It's never good to be short on explosives when you have a active war going on right next door. So they need to get that fixed. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say they need to get that situation fixed if it is a problem. But another thing I have to say is that I don't believe that it's going to take them years to fix that situation, because does anyone really think that a government would go, yeah, let's just give all of our ammunition to Ukraine so that way if the war does escalate, we're screwed? Like, I don't, like, that seems like that's such a illogical thing that it couldn't have happened. You know, and it almost kind of sounds like, because I was just thinking about that after we talked about that last time, it almost sounds like the exact same talk at the beginning of the war, where people were going, we're running out of javelin ammo, there's not going to be any left, we're never going to have any more, and then we just produced more of it, and it was a non sequitur issue. I think this might be a similar vein.
Maybe so, maybe.
Because it sounds weird to me that like every single country on Earth right now says we're providing as much support as possible as long as it doesn't violate our national security and as long as it doesn't put us in a bad position. And now they're saying that although every single country has pretty much laid that out and that's been understood, and that's something we've been repeating a million times on this channel, now they're saying we have not looked out for our own interests, and now we don't have enough ammunition for anything, and it's going to take us years to get more. That doesn't really sound like it makes a lot of sense when I think about it like that, and we've heard similar things like that before. Why?
Because they're counting on the U.S. to come in and basically bail them out whenever they're in trouble?
Nah, I don't think that. I don't think that much, because the Europeans act as a clump now, and that's what the European Union kind of is for, is that they're all like states with their own militias, or well, more like their own national guards. And then whenever anything happens, they put them all under a centralized command. At least that's the plan. And then they operate side by side with the United States. So I would say I don't really think they expect the United States to bail them out, especially considering that the Polish are doing the complete opposite of ever planning to be bailed out, and they're building up a military, the likes of which makes every other military in Europe look like a joke. So I would say I don't really think so, but also I don't know who said that. Do you know who said that they were going to have to wait years to fix the ammunition issue?
I can't remember who exactly said it, but it was within one of the articles. It was either Politico or Reuters, one of the other that said that.
And I'm going to have to be honest, I'm going to have to take it with a grain of salt, because while I usually quote Reuters, at the same time, it just seems weird. That almost seems like the Javelin talk that we heard at the beginning of the war, with us providing Javelin ammo to Ukraine and how we're going to run out and never have any more forever. And then we have so much still, because we're just purchasing more and producing more, that not only are we rebuilding our own stockpiles, we're still sending Javelin ammo to Ukraine in the thousands. So with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says the Czech president says that Ukraine has only one chance in the next few months to conduct a counteroffensive. And what are your thoughts? 31% said he's right. Ukraine has only one shot. 15% said unsure. 31% said, why does he say that? And 23% said he's wrong. Ukraine is firmly winning. Now, from my understanding, I was trying to make sense of his comments because they were kind of a little bit confused. I think he was trying to say that Ukraine can't afford to mess up right now, because if they do, they could get easily bogged down by the Russians and end up getting pushed back even further. I think that's what he meant, but I would have to disagree. I think that Ukraine is firmly winning right now, even though they're getting pushed back in Bakhmut. We've been over that 1,000 times. It's not significant. And the Russians have only taken in February not even 1% of the country. So I think that might be a little bit of fear-mongering on the Czech president's part. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, and can you reread me his quote again so that way I can hear it correctly?
He says that Ukraine has only one chance in the next few months to conduct a counteroffensive.
I mean, like, he's technically not wrong, because there's only a month-and-a-half long window in between when it gets really too hot for infantry to be trudging around in the field nonstop, and also in between the Rasputin. So there's only a month-and-a-half window, which is probably big enough to conduct one major offensive in, and then they'll have to wait until the early fall to conduct another one. So technically he's not wrong, but if he meant that in a way as in the next few months they have to do something, otherwise it's all lost, that's not true. Because this war is going to be going on for a good while longer. That's become clear at this point. It's just that if they want to launch an offensive here soon, they're only going to have a month-and-a-half window in between the end of the Rasputitsa and the beginning of the middle of summer to really launch a good one. And of course, summer is a time when you can launch counteroffensives, but the weather becomes a little hot. I think in Ukraine, it gets on up into the high 80s or maybe even the low 90s in the summer. And correct me if I'm wrong on that, because I think that's what it was like last summer, and I don't know if that was an extremely hot one for Ukraine or not. But if it gets too hot, it's very difficult to keep soldiers pushing in an offensive, especially if they are dismounted from vehicles and they're having to advance through the fields, which is most likely what they'll be doing in an offensive. There could be a lot of heat casualties from heat cramps, heat stroke, all that kind of stuff, that then slows down an offensive and causes even further casualties that could have been avoided during an opportune time of the year in terms of weather. So I hope that addresses the poll fairly well, because if he's talking about just from the strategic perspective, I mean, like, yeah, he's kind of right. But if he's talking about from a perspective of the war hinges on them doing something in the next month and a half, and if they don't, they lose, that's not really true. That would be fear-mongering. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next poll says, today, Putin claimed he withheld a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2014 due to economic and military reasons. And what do you think about that? 54% said it's false and it's just Russian propaganda. 26% said it's true, Russia wasn't ready yet. 11% said unsure, and 8% said that seems off. And real quick, Enforcer, tell me, was Ukraine seeking NATO membership or even hinting at it back in 2014?
Back in the day, Ukraine was largely just adamant on joining the European Union and becoming a full member.
Now, see, Putin has said that he invaded Ukraine because he's concerned about NATO expansion right up to Russia's borders. That is what he's been crying and saying the entire time. But this contradicts that. He's totally contradicting his entire narrative now. And he's really, we know he lies all the time. This is simply another lie, in my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
What I would have to say is the reason why this is a bit of a two-part ordeal here. The reason why the annexation of Crimea happened in 2014 is because if Ukraine joined the European Union, they would end up losing the Black Sea Fleet's port basing rights in port access rights, in Sevastopol. They would have lost those. And so he had to annex Crimea to try and keep the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol. That was what happened in 2014. And it seemed as though they were largely okay with just staying there and doing that. But then when Zelensky became president and he started pushing for European Union membership as well, and European Union membership has been pushed by the Ukrainians since 2014, but then he also wanted NATO membership as well, so that way there was security, an actual, I guess you could say, protection or assurance of security for Ukraine. That's when the second part took off. Because until then, there was no catalyst for the Russians to really try and conduct a full-fledged war. But then when Ukraine said they started the application process to NATO, then not only could the Ukrainians have an incredibly strong, I guess you could say, claim and also a lot of backing to retaking Crimea on a diplomatic, I guess you could say, sphere, the U.S. could possibly be right on the Russian border and reaching Volgograd or Moscow within the next, few weeks if a conventional war was to begin. So that started off the second part of the war. But still, that's a stupid premise, because he's saying if he had money back then, he would have started the war. They didn't have money now. And if we look at the Russian GDP, let's look at their GDP in 2014. So in 2014, they were far better off economically than they are now. What the hell? He's talking about money. They had more money then. They could have done that then. Also, look how badly the Russian economy tanked after that. They went down to nothing.
And also, somebody brought up a good point earlier. If they held off the full-scale invasion that they were going to try to do in 2014 and waited until now for their military to be prepared, they weren't even prepared now. So that's just bull.
Yeah, hell, he's sitting there talking about, we have to wait to have more money. And he's got, 2 little stacks of cash on his desk. And then in 2022, he sits there and has, $1 note on his desk. And he says, okay, go now. We have enough money. It's that doesn't make any sense. None of that makes any sense. That claim is just stupid and baseless. So with that, I hope that addresses that poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And our last poll says today, Pentagon spokesperson expressed concern about Zelensky's meeting with China. And what are your thoughts? 42% said, I agree with the Pentagon. It is concerning. 23% said, unsure. And 35% said, I disagree with the Pentagon. It's fine. And after we have learned more, we have learned that China has confirmed that weapons were shipped from their country and eventually made their way to Russia, in effect supporting their war. All of China's actions indicate that they are heavily against Ukraine's freedom and they don't support it whatsoever. And their words are kind of on the border of questionable as well. I'm not sure what the Ukrainian government is up to by trying to meet with China still. It doesn't make really any sense. And I can understand why the U.S. would be concerned about that because that is our largest adversary. And if it doesn't make any sense, there must be something else going on, and we'll have to find out in the future. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it is concerning to me. I believe that the Ukrainians shouldn't really be talking about much of anything with the Chinese. There's nothing really to benefit out of that with, and considering that they've already provided support, really the only aim of Ukraine talking to the Chinese is to try and sway them enough that they don't support the Russians, yet they already have. And from what we know, they may still be doing that to a very small amount. So there is no benefit in talking to the Chinese. There's no real point to it. And I would say that they should not talk to the Chinese, in my opinion. So with that, I hope that... And also, Avdiivka said, trade! In all caps.
You don't want that.
No, you do not want that, because then the Chinese start getting tendrils in your economy, and then you sit there and have a U.S. situation where everyone goes, if we want to do anything against the Chinese, we're kaput. And really, I got to be honest with you, economic activity with the Chinese is something that should be avoided by really any country and should be curtailed massively, because look at what economic activity involves with the Chinese. It involves almost censoring all of your media that you can even produce in your own country to be suitable for a Chinese market and suitable for the Chinese Communist Party, so that way they can improve it on their censors and show it in their country. So in a way, you're indirectly limiting your own abilities, free speech-wise and everything else, if you ever have the Chinese involved in your market or you ever think about selling anything in China. And I'm not really for that.
And also, I saw someone else, I think it's Activista, say diplomatic relations established after the war. There's really no need for that whatsoever. The United States and all of our private equity firms are willing to throw billions at Ukraine to help them rebuild, and that establishes a strong relationship with the U.S., which is a democracy and not a communist country, which supports freedom. And we've also given them, I believe, like $80 billion to help fight this war. So Ukraine should do everything they can to try to link up and stay with us, and not branch out and try to go to a communist country to seek relations of any sort. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And let me give you all a good example of why there shouldn't be a lot of economic dealings with China. Y'all know that there's a lot of times on this YouTube channel where we sit here and say, oh, wait, Matthew, I got to stop you right there. We can't talk about that because YouTube doesn't want people talking about a certain thing that China doesn't like. Otherwise, they'll come down here and they'll bust out our kneecaps. And that's what Chinese economic involvement entails, is that companies like YouTube that want to market themselves in China sit there and go, oh my God, if we allow the enforcer to say this stuff, the Chinese aren't going to want to do business with us anymore, and the party's going to cut us off from the Chinese market. So we're going to go and put a boot down on what people can say in a country where they're free to say something like that, because otherwise our entire company isn't marketable in China. And that's the problem. Like, just on this one premise here of what we do on YouTube, that's why I don't agree with it. And I don't think the Ukrainians should either, because then you slowly start having companies doing what YouTube does and goes, well, if the Chinese don't like it, then we're just not having it at all. But even talking about that, you know, we could end up getting our kneecaps busted out by YouTube anyways. But with that...
And also another thing is Zelensky has made a very big point. He will not meet with Putin because he doesn't trust him, and he is basically the perpetrator of a genocide. We can't get into it. I'm not going to say any more than that, but we've seen similar things happening over there with the other guy that he's about to meet with. And if he's not willing to meet with Putin, the same should go for the other guy, because he's as equal, if not worse, than the guy he won't meet with already.
And also, Driving and Luton said YouTube is banned in China, lol. And I hear that, and I think that is the case, but at the same time, they also put a lot of restrictions on what people can and can't say on YouTube, because for some reason they care about what the Chinese think. So I'm guessing that somehow, some way, there's an economic incentive to care about what China thinks. And also on top of that, the NBA as a great example, because the Chinese are huge fans of basketball. The NBA is heavily censored nowadays because of what the Chinese do and don't like, and it makes it marketable or not in the Chinese market, depending on what's allowed in the NBA. So, you know, I don't know. I think you're right there. I think YouTube is banned, but at the same time, for some reason, they care about what the Chinese like and don't like. So I guess there's something they're marketing out there somewhere, but I really don't know. Anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll, so we are moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, let's go over that Morse, solved tonight by Mark Hodges, Cife, Rumpelstiltskin, Cliff Simonson, and also JP's RC. So he said tonight's Morse code says they were so close, yet so far. Well, back to the drawing board.
Ding, 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 ding. That's the sound of money, and you all got it right. You all got it right. They were so close, yet so far. So they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to fail again. And so thank you. Thank you all for deciphering that Morse code message. Y'all got it again on the 389th day of the war. And with that, you're not going to believe it. But we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from John B. Rempel, who says, any truth to the story that Russian women prisoners are receiving military training for frontline duty?
I haven't actually seen anything to verify that. I haven't really heard about anything like that for that instance. Also, we just got a 200 Canadian donation that just sent us up to 7K. Let's go! Oh, yeah! And so, now getting back to that question, I haven't heard about that. I haven't seen any proof on that. I will be looking around for videos, though. But until then, we really can't confirm whether it is or isn't happening. At this moment, it's just a rumor. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have a question from Enoch, who says, if Bakhmut is not important, then why did Zelensky say he couldn't let it fall, as it would give the Russians a gateway to 3 other cities?
Gateway to 3 other cities. I would say that I'd kind of have to disagree with that a little bit, because I think the ones he's talking about is Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, and I guess Konstantinivka. And yeah, Konstantinivka is on the highway leading down from Bakhmut, but it isn't really that large or significant either. Really, the only 2 cities that are kind of in the area that are large and important are Slovyansk and Kramatorsk. Because with Slovyansk and Kramatorsk, you could use those as massive supply hubs, and then march forward from the highways near Pokrovsk and also Izium, and then forward towards Plavrohad, Dnipro, and so on, taking the entirety of the Donbass. But I just don't think that's the case, because the Russians, without taking Bakhmut, could just hop up onto this M03 highway and start going towards Slovyansk right now, because it is a shorter distance to Slovyansk and Kramatorsk down the M03 than it is to go south towards Konstantinivka and then up towards Kramatorsk. That's even longer of a trip in terms of distance. So I would have to say Bakhmut doesn't really hold that much significance, and way back in the day, it was very clear that it did not hold any significance. So the battle was really more to chop down the Russians to size, more so than to hold the town for any strategic value. So with that, I hope that answers the question the best I can. And I know that a lot of people these days are starting to get into the camp that Bakhmut is actually important, but we've been here covering this battle for like 5 months or 6 months at this point. And for 5 out of these 6 months, it's been on the same, everyone's been on the same page around the entire world, and the Institute for the Study of War is on the same page, and a lot of people like to source them whenever, you know, they feel like it, that Bakhmut holds no real strategic value as a town, and I still think it holds no real strategic value as a town. So with that, I hope that answers the question.
To me, there's only 2 possibilities to why Zelensky would say that. Either he's not confident in the lines behind Bakhmut and they're not as fortified as we've been told, or Zelensky is trying to place pressure on Western countries to get more aid to be more equipped to conduct a counteroffensive.
And I mean, like, there really is no such thing in a modern war as well-prepared lines. Like, the Russians are kind of a little weird in doing that, where they dig in these massive fortifications like in the south. For the Ukrainians, there's very rarely ever been truly fortified positions, except for in the north near Kyiv on the Belarusian border. That's the only place we've ever seen them make pre-prepared defensive positions. But in places like the rest of the Eastern Front, there really isn't such a thing as well pre-prepared positions. They just make them wherever needed. And so if they got pushed out of Bakhmut, you would see them start digging trenches and making defensive positions back here behind Bakhmut. But until then, it will be no defensive positions. That's just the way the Ukrainian army operates. So I honestly got to say, I think that this pertinence of Bakhmut is just because it's become a major point in the news. Around the world, it's been a battle that's been sensational. You know, it's what you imagine from the Russians is literally enemy at the gates. They're just running waves of people into lines of defenses and they're getting mowed down. So it's made news everywhere. It's been on the front pages of everywhere for months. And so they're trying to hold the city because if they lose it, that's gotten so much attention that they may be afraid that people start to think the Ukrainians lost the war, although this is probably one of the least significant cities that Russia has ever fought a major battle for. That would be my opinion, because there's nothing that really is there in Bakhmut that is worth anything. And, you know, besides that, we've seen the Ukrainians fight over worthless fields like in the Northeast forever, and we can see that even with them just pushing forward and then making impromptu defensive positions, they can hold an entire 150-mile long line with no issue whatsoever, even when the terrain really isn't in their advantage. So really, I just don't really see any significance in Bakhmut. So I hope that answers the question fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from White Lightning 777, who says, why aren't all the Kremlin sympathizers registered as foreign agents, to include Ritter, Redacted, McGregor, etc.? And Enforcer, before you answer that question, I've been recommended a video from this Ritter fella by several different people, and they wanted me to give my opinion on it. And I've got to say that basically everything the fella said was inaccurate. I didn't hear anything that sounded solid from him. He claimed that Russia was transparent. He claimed that Vladimir Putin had control over his territories, and he's the one that doesn't really make decisions, but he delegates it down to the local levels, and he is not responsible for any of the war crimes in Ukraine. And the guy's thoughts were not very good, but that's just my opinion. But Enforcer, what say you?
I haven't seen that video to really comment on it. So, I'm going to have to refrain from commenting on it because I haven't really heard enough about it to really speak on it. So with that, we are on to the next...
You wouldn't agree with it, trust me.
Well, I mean, like, if you want to send me the link, we could watch it and see what he says.
It's like 2 hours long.
Oh, well, then I'm not... Hell, man. If I had that much time...
It's our stream length.
If I had that much time, I'd watch a movie or something. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from TTCMZX, who says, do you think countries may just want to go to war just to fuel the military-industrial complex?
No. Because a lot of people always talk about, the military-industrial complex. It's a keyword, well, a buzzword. It's a buzzword that a lot of people love to put out there. The military-industrial complex... You know, and I'm going to make a great argument here because for some reason no one ever talks about this one when talking about the military-industrial complex. Everyone's always talking about, the military-industrial complex, they run things, they're trying to make some money. And then you look at Europe that sat there in, like, compared to 30 years ago, they practically neutered themselves in terms of their military sizes. And none of their militaries are even as large as they were in the early 90s. Like, they're like a third of the size most of the time. And if the military-industrial complex really did exist, you would have never seen any of these European countries just cut down their militaries to a third of their original size, because the military-industrial complex that's just all-powerful and, you know, a malevolent being, it would have sat there and forced them to keep buying equipment, keep their militaries massively sized, and just kept it like that forever. The U.S. is the only country in the world that spends as much as it does on the military. And the reason why is because we are a global superpower. And the second thing is that we are a global superpower on a continent where no one else is. except for Canada and Mexico. And, you know, Canada is a great country and Mexico is a great country. And of course, they're in our sphere. But at the same time, a lot of the happenings is going on overseas, is going on in Asia and Europe. And so we have to get over there to Asia and Europe. And to do that, especially at the speed we need to, we have to spend massive amounts of money. One, to have massive forces, and two, to have an ability to supply and move those massive forces wherever we need them to be, and then also to keep other people in line, like, for example, the Saudis, which we're really only allies with them for the oil and also for their geographic location. And also, Four Flat Tire said 800 bases are expensive, and they are. And those 800 bases are a part of us being the global superpower of the West and trying to keep everything held together. You know, because, and here's another thing I have to say. Everyone always talks about the Russians don't have any overseas bases, and the Chinese don't either. The U.S. does, though. And the reason why is because the Soviet Union, or modern day Russia, and also China are where things are going down. Why do they need foreign bases when they're where the action's at? They don't need one because they are the base. They are the domestic base. They're in the middle of it. The U.S. has to have foreign bases because we're not in Europe. We're in North America. And we have to move our entire military over to Europe so that way when things go down where the action would happen, we're there for it. That's why we have so many foreign bases. So I would have to say the war in Ukraine is not going on to fuel the military-industrial complex, because if that was the case, we would have never seen the Europeans cut their militaries down to a third of their size it was 30 years ago, because the military-industrial complex would have forced them to keep it the original 1990 size. So with that, I hope that does answer that question fairly well. Because, you know, that's always something I hear and nobody really gets. The military is like a dead end money-wise. Like, you put money in there and you never really get it back out. You know, you just pay these people to make weapons, that's it. You know, you could spend money a whole lot better ways to incentivize your economy and get a lot more money out of it. I mean, like, hell, just talking about the transportation sector. Like, if the United States started to invest heavily in the railroads and subsidized railroads where maybe they weren't derailing as much and made the laws a little bit stricter safety-wise, you would probably see that would be a lot more beneficial economically for the United States than buying weapons that really just end up being a dead end economically. So I hope that answers that question fairly well. Good question, by the way, because that's one that's thrown around a lot. So I guess it's a great one to tackle for that reason, but I would have to say the war isn't going on for that reason alone. It's more for the strategic reasons, and the arms dealers making money is just kind of the side effect. So with that, hope that answers that question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from AD, who says, Enforcer, when the Putin regime does come to an end in Russia, what type of government would take over and who in Russia would lead it?
So that's an excellent question. And it's a really tough one to answer, and it's kind of sounds pessimistic, but this is the way it would most likely go down. You see, the Russians, ever since the Mongol invasion of the 13th century, have ended up having some kind of authoritarian government. A lot of people look at the Tsars as being better than the Soviets, but in reality, the Soviets and the Tsars were almost one and the same. It's just that the Tsars weren't as heavy-handed as killing people, but they were heavy-handed at making sure that they lived in squalor. The reason being is that the Russian political system, ever since the invasion by the Mongols, has been an exploitative one, because that's the kind of system that the Mongols ran, was an exploitative system. So the Russians don't really care about improving the lives of average people or trying to modernize for the sake of standard of living. The only reason they modernize is to be on par with their rivals, and beyond that, they don't really care about the rest of it. And you can see a great proof of that when the Russians did try to become a democratic country in the early 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when Boris Yeltsin had the Russian parliament shelled inside of the parliament building, which was called the White House, funnily enough. And we saw pretty much democracy in Russia die in just a matter of a few short years, and it went back to the original authoritarianism that is just synonymous with Russian political culture. So if Putin fell out of power, we would probably see a very similar governmental structure to Putin's structure or Yeltsin's structure, even a Soviet or Tsarist structure that we've seen persist for hundreds of years. There's really just not a lot of change available there because the culture doesn't really allow that kind of change. It's kind of like when people talk about the Scandinavian countries and how well off they are in education and things like that. Nobody really thinks it's really their culture that is kind of pushing those kinds of high standards of living and high quality of life, because if you go through their history, you'll see that that is a driving motive because of where they are in the world. But anyways, with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Charlie Nickel, and I was told, since we called out his shirt store yesterday, that y'all have gone over there and absolutely cleaned it out, so good to hear. And Charlie says, do you guys have a feel for how bad the common man vibe is in Russia, or is it just business as usual and anyone in panic mode?
The common man vibe, if he's, and I'm taking that as he's just asking about what the average Joe is doing in Russia right now.
Yes.
So the common man vibe is that they've lost some consumer goods. Apparently some companies have actually circumvented the sanctions and still exist there under fake names. And Tasty Period is not one of them. McDonald's actually pulled out of Russia, and they're being run by some kind of fake puppet, the Russian setup. But some other ones, I believe it's like Gap or in H&K, they somehow circumvented the sanctions and they're still making profits in Russia and still there. So there were some consumer goods, luxury goods that were lost from the sanctioning, but there are still some available. At the beginning of the war, there appeared to be some massive food shortage of grains and simple foods, but it appears that that may have actually ended and the food situation is stabilized, although it's still fragile. And also, another thing that we've understood is that in some places in Russia, although we don't know how persistent this is or how widespread it is, some people are not getting paid at work and they're going on strikes and they're just not showing up to work anymore. We don't know how often that's happening, though. So the actual situation in Russia may be worse than it was, but I'm not going to say it's absolutely destitute. They're still eking by in there, and they're not like completely falling apart, at least on the personal, from person to person average Joe level, but it's still not as good as it was pre-war. I would say if you could like put a percentage on it, probably like a 20 to 25% reduction in their standard of living. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, Charlie. And also very cool to hear that you got cleaned out. That's really neat. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from Havlin Tuff, who says, why are we selling military vehicles instead of sending them to Ukraine?
We're selling the military vehicles to try and make the economic loss for the United States a little less. There's really not such a thing as giving away stuff. Giving away things is kind of a misnomer, especially whenever it comes from a government institution. Like, for example, in America, whenever, during a few years ago, people would go, oh, I got my STEMI. They're literally just handing you back your tax money, pretty much, a sum of it, for you to spend, in a way. Well, we're not going down that whole rabbit hole because that will probably become political, but there's no real...
The Fed prints that money, baby.
Oh, God. Okay.
Money printer goes brrr.
We're not going there. But anyways...
that's not even political. That's just facts.
Well, I mean, like, it's facts, yeah, but I don't know. Some people will probably try and make it political or something. But anyways, there's no real thing is free, and so we're not really selling it to them either. We're leasing it, so they have to pay us back for the vehicles that we've sent eventually. But it's usually a reduced rate than the actual value of the vehicle, and then that's even off of a reduced rate after it's been in the military for a long time and practically worthless. So with that, I hope that answers the question the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And I happen to agree with you, Havlin Tuft. I think we should be sending some of those military vehicles to Ukraine because, trust me, the government doesn't need the $20,000 from the sale of that Humvee. They don't need it. But the Fed has unlimited money, according to the Fed.
Well, yeah, they have. Oh, that's what they said. They have unlimited money. And then, we're not going to go there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to TTC MZX once again, who says, is there any updates on whether the new tanks have made it to the front line yet?
There has not been any updates, and that has been really weird because we saw the 4 Leopard 2s arrive on February 24th. It's almost an entire month later, and we still don't know where those Leopard 2s wound up. So right now, I have to be honest with you, we have no idea whether those made it to the front lines or not. they may still be sitting in a storage depot somewhere or something else. We really have no idea what happened to them. But they should eventually make it to the front lines. It's just that we don't know when. So with that, I hope that answers the question fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a question from John Luke Sills, who says, do you think a clash will occur around Melitopol anytime soon?
I wouldn't say a clash would occur around Melitopol fairly soon, because the direction... Well, I can't get into the exact direction because I don't want to go into OPSEC that badly, but a clash around Melitopol, that would be the ultimate culmination of a perfect offensive by the Ukrainians, because it's really the last place they can go, because beyond Melitopol, you reach the Sea of Azov. So I would say perhaps. It depends on a perfect offensive being conducted, and considering that we've seen perfect offensives conducted by the Ukrainians before, it's possible, but I wouldn't say that it would be soon, because they may be going in an opposite direction during this next month and a half window in the late spring. So with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right. And this one goes to Gabriel Mum, who says, how much would it cost to give every Ukrainian soldier an AR-15 style rifle, and would that money be well spent or better spent on something else?
Let's see the question. How much does an M4 for the Army cost? Let's see. They say that the average cost for an M4 in the U.S. Army is $700, and I'm guessing that's for a wholesale order from a factory, like it's a contract order of hundreds of thousands of them, and it costs $700 per each one. So if we take that cost, and we say that there's 270,000 infantrymen in the Ukrainian army right now. Let's just go with that as an average number. 270,000 times 700 means that it would cost $189 million to give 270,000 infantrymen an M4. Actually not that expensive when you think about it. And actually certain devs said it may be about $400 in a bulk contract order. So it wouldn't be that expensive actually, because $189 million, hell, even the Ukrainians could find that kind of money before the war. And so it's possible to say that they could go and equip all of the soldiers of Ukraine with an M4. The question is, do we have that many to give? And also, if we didn't, would we be willing to go and get those contract orders, and how long would it take for those contract orders to be fulfilled? Because you have to remember, the United States does those kinds of things in bulk, and we don't just have a constant stream of M4s coming into the Army at a massive rate. We make a couple of large contracts where we get hundreds of thousands of them, maybe 4 contracts where like 300,000 are bought each, and then we keep those guns around in the military for 20 years or 30 years before they actually get thrown out. And then even sometimes after that, after they get a full service life in the U.S., we send them to another country. Like, for example, a lot of our M1 Garens that were used in the First World War would end up in the hands of South Vietnam, South Korea, and the Philippines later on in their life, continue to exist in a whole other service life, about another 50 years of service put on that rifle, and then we would end up getting them back, and now they're sold as a CMP for like $650. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are now on to the final, and also a lot of y'all are bringing up ammunition. That's a massive cost added on, because once you own a gun, you find out it's so expensive to shoot them, you end up shooting the value of the gun over in like a year at least once or twice, you know, even if you're just a casual shooter. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well, and we are on to the final question of the night. And so with that, who is the lucky last person who asked the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Christian Cruz, who says, Enforcer, is it normal that people in Moscow are kept inside whenever Putin drives by? And I wonder how many people were forced to stay inside in Mariupol.
Yes, it's actually quite normal. Putin's very scared of being killed. A lot of the leaders of Russia have always been scared of being killed, and so they go overboard in making sure that they're safe. But then again, it's kind of similar to how the President of the United States, whenever they come outside now, they're like in an armored glass bubble wherever they go. Like, even if they go up to have a speech, there's like this giant armored, like bulletproof glass shield around their podium. And I guess you could say it's a little bit overkill, because they don't do that with the president, although they keep him in an armored limo whenever they move him around. It's not that abnormal, though. And I would say that they probably did the exact same thing. They probably did that overboard in Mariupol, making sure that no one could even get near them. And that's why you only had the small group of like 10 to 13 handpicked actors or real people from Mariupol that were around them. So with that, I hope that answers that question fairly well. And with that, that was the last question of tonight's stream. We're going to be rounding out tonight's stream now. Of course, I thank you all so much once again for watching. If you all did enjoy, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, share this with your friends because it helps this channel to grow and it helps the Lee Spring Army to reach more people. And so with that, I hope you all have a great night. Stay safe, take care, good luck, and of course, Slava Ukraini.
And Hiram Slava.
Also, thank y'all for a great fundraiser. I forgot to say that again, but y'all did amazing. Thank you all so much once again for helping save the children.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards. Усміхнеться доля, згинуть наші вороженьки, як роса на сонці, запануємо ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що ми браття козацького роду. Душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу і покажем, що